Welcome to HP FanFiction. Support me by subscribing the channel. Also, like and share the video to keep me motivated to make more videos like these. The day after Oliver Twist's defense article, the leaky cauldron was packed with people. Can't believe that the minister dared to accuse a teenager of lying, one of the regulars exclaimed angrily. Going against a boy, making sure that the boy can't even defend himself by not even inviting him. That's despicable. I wonder how we sane dare think the minister was doing us right. A lot of others nodded at that. Tom meanwhile shook his head, looking at the newspaper. The lad has helped us a lot till now, he said, and considering the things the lad has found out about our minister, I'm not sure how long that man will be able to keep his place at the top. We definitely don't need someone who goes against teenagers while at the same time playing with our laws himself. A lot of the patrons nodded in agreement at that. If the minister doesn't straighten up soon, mayhap he should be replaced, one of the more hag-like women in the leaky cauldron said. Others nodded in agreement. I'm definitely wife the lad, if I'm asked, another wizard said. He's definitely got the better arguments. Others said in agreement. Yeah, another part exclaimed. Tom guessed that the minister might have done himself no favor when he went to the Wizarding Wireless to speak up against Oliver Twist. Maybe a year ago people would have bought into his claims, but since then Oliver Twist had emerged and become the voice of justice in this dark, dreary world. The lad had challenged people, had pointed out truths, and he had made sure that whoever wanted to look up his claims would have no trouble verifying them. Maybe Tom had to admit in easing the verification by adding some proof to his counter next to the newspaper, but then he was a simple innkeeper who would suspect an innkeeper like him when it came to influencing the public by making them verify the things written down in their paper. Tom smiled inwardly, writing the pages that showed an excerpt of the logbook of Azkaban, as well as several excerpts of laws mentioned in the article, and some statements of students about the mentioned issues. Some of those things Tom had put together himself, other had been left with him by an old friend of his father, and again others had accumulated after people saw that Tom didn't mind if somebody put down their written statement about the year before last at Hogwarts. A lot of those who wrote down their experience were passerbys who had back then still been students. Others were the parents of said students. Tom suppressed another grin when a new statement was added by one Oliver Wood to the pile already there. Without looking at it, Tom reached into his pocket and touched the paper slip inside. Some evidence for your collection, my friend, the slip read. I am thoroughly baffled that the minister's lackeys haven't seen your contribution to those articles yet. Sincerely, Sal Sanctuary. Tom definitely wondered if the minister would ever find out that one of the reasons why his plan so thoroughly backfired was the man who served him his after-work fire whiskey. Probably not. Air Black. Augusta addressed the younger man, frowning. I am not quite sure that your idea is the best way to go ahead with our search. Regulus looked at her, innocent in his eyes. Madam Longbottom, he said, we need to get more information on the Gaunts. We've looked through all your books, but just knowing the family history won't be enough. We need tangible information. So you want to break into the ministry, Augusta said, frowning. Regulus looked at her innocently. It would be the fastest way, he said, and I don't plan on breaking into the ministry. I thought that you would distract the clerk who's monitoring the knowledge about the estates of wizarding nobility while I search the information about the Gaunts and copy them. That's still breaking into the ministry, Air Black, Augusta replied. You're planning theft. Regulus shrugged. I'd say I borrow some things I need, he corrected her, still looking as innocent as he managed. It's not as if I plan on removing anything that would be missed after all. Air Black? Regulus's face turned serious. It's this or running around the country, hoping for a lead, he replied. There has to be. We don't have time to search for another way, Regulus said. We all know that the Dark Lord will return to the public as soon as he has gathered his army. If we want to stop him before it comes to an all-out war, we have to do it now. Augusta frowned at that. But why didn't you stop him before he returned? She asked, concerned. Regulus sighed. Sal told me that he couldn't act until after the Dark Lord regained his body, he said, Without his body, the Dark Lord would have felt the destruction of most of his Horcruxes, and as a wraith he would have been able to intercept the destruction. He would have been able to stop us. Now that he has a body again, he won't feel the destruction of most of his devices, meaning that he won't be able to stop us until it's too late. Augusta narrowed her eyes. You said the most of his devices, she repeated. Regulus shrugged. There's a chance that he will notice it when he has lost the most of them. The pull towards death will be stronger the more of his devices are destroyed, but he won't be able to notice it until he's mostly gone already, if he isn't preoccupied. If he is, the chances that he won't notice until they're all gone is quite high, Regulus replied. Augusta sighed. Still, she said, breaking into the ministry. Regulus tried another innocent look on the long-bottom matriarch. Nobody will ever find out, he said. It's not as if anybody would suspect Regulus Black and Augusta Longbottom when they find out that somebody took some things from the ministry. August opened her mouth to object, but then closed it again. She sighed. I guess you're right, Herr Black, she said, giving in. So we're breaking into the ministry? Regulus asked, interested. Augusta raised an eyebrow. I thought we don't break in anywhere, she said dryly. Regulus nodded seriously. Of course not, he said, sounding as serious as he could manage. We're just visiting and borrowing some things. Augusta had to fight hard to not roll her eyes at that. Regrettably, a lady didn't roll her eyes, even if she wished to do so sometimes. At Hogwarts, the latest article and the interview with the Wizarding Wireless was also one of the important gossip pieces. I think the minister's actions were utterly despicable, Minerva McGonagall huffed while leaning back in her chair in the staff room. Going verbally against a child without even having the decency to invite it so that it could actually defend itself. Despicable, really. Well, it definitely wasn't the first time, Poppy Pomfrey replied, sighing. McGonagall frowned. What are you talking about, Poppy? The nurse shrugged. We all know that he proclaimed Potter and his friends confounded nearly 2 years ago, and he went against Potter's claim of you-know-who's return by actually slandering the boy, Pomfrey said. I'm definitely not surprised that he tried to do the same again this time around. It worked the last 2 times after all. You sound as if you don't believe it will this time around, Poppy. Pomona Sprout entered the conversation surprised. Of course it won't, Phileas Flitwick, the diminutive charms master, exclaimed. Potter might have shown hesitance in using the press to reach his goals. Twist, on the other hand, has been using the press all year to get out his own opinion. Like the counter-article shows, Twist won't sit back and let the minister walk all over him. Twist lives for the confrontation, and I bet that this won't be the last time he'll confront anyone in public. Albus Dumbledore frowned at that. So you think that he will do that again? He asked, concerned. The charms master shrugged. Certainly, he said, if the minister doesn't back down or if someone else tries to confront Twist. The headmaster's brows furrowed further at that. Maybe we should start looking into Twist further, he said. It won't do us any good if he manages to split the unity of the British wizarding world now that Voldemort's back. It will just aid the dark elements if we can't unite us because of some minor misunderstandings. Phileas Flitwick frowned at that. I don't think that Twist is the one destroying our unity, he finally said. The boy is trying to right our world. He's trying to make us see reason, to open our eyes to the faults of our current situation. I'm sure that his articles and his ability to make people think will just aid against you-know-who and his cohorts, not hinder our side. Albus Dumbledore just smiled benignantly. Nevertheless, don't forget the saying the way to hell is paved with good intentions, he reminded them. Mr. Twist might be too young to understand this, so we definitely have to find him and explain to him that there are better times than now to show his displeasure with our current leadership. Now we have to fight, afterwards we can take the time and look at politics. A lot of the teachers nodded at that. Only Flitwick shook his head, sighing, while Snape barely stopped himself from rolling his eyes, scoffing nearly silently. I'm not even sure if the headmaster understands the meaning of that saying. Phileas Flitwick surprisingly was thinking along the same ways. Later that day, a new secret of Hogwarts started to come together the first time. While thanks to the new defense against the dark arts, Professor Hogwarts had started to change. Yes, that woman had started up her inquisition not only of the teachers, but of Hogwarts' social life. A few determined Gryffindors had decided to act and put together a group to save their OWL greats in defense. They had spread the word by mouth, hoping to reach all those people who wanted to learn defense without reaching those that were utterly loyal to the new High Inquisitor. That promotion had happened just a day before, shortly after the interview in the Wizarding Wireless. Spreading word had gone well. They had told those they trusted the time and date of the first meeting, telling them that if they trusted someone else, to bring them along as well. Harry had insisted that nobody was discriminated just because a house or his or her parents. If you trusted the person, then you could invite them along. Hermione had guessed that they would maybe be 10 or 15 students at most. She was quite surprised when stepping into the room she saw the people who were willing to train with them in secret. She hadn't thought that that many people were willing to break school rules and start a secret club. There were even quite a lot Slytherins in the crowd, all of them looking a little bit hesitating to mingle with the other houses, yet willing to stand among them and work with them. Hermione wondered who had had the guts to invite them along to the ride. She hadn't thought that anybody in the other 3 houses was close enough to a Slytherin to believe that they wouldn't squeal on them on the first opportunity. She would have been shocked if she had known that the person who did it was standing currently right next to her. Harry, standing next to her, looked quite smug. "Seems like they took the bait," he said, half amused, half relieved. Ron looked a little bit ill at that. "So you'll force us to work together with Slytherins now?" he asked, a little bit green in the face at that thought. Harry threw him a half-annoyed look, then stepped up in front of the crowd. "Welcome to the old training hall of Hogwarts," he told them. It had been Harry who picked the location and made sure that everybody knew how to find it. Hermione had never heard about the training area they were inhabiting right now, but Harry seemed to know it well enough. She wondered how long he had known of the location and how he had learned about it. She was quite sure that it wasn't on the map. The crowd quietened when Harry's voice echoed of the walls. "We're here because the current teacher for defense is more than inadequate. At the same time, we need to know those things we should learn in that class to pass our OWLs," Harry continued to say. A lot of the people in front of him nodded at that exclamation. "So here we are, everyone of Hogwarts who's interested to learn more defense than what is currently taught by our dear Professor of Defense." There was a murmur at that. Finally, one of the Slytherins spoke up. "Tell me, Potter, who's planning to teach us? I can only see students in this room," Theodore Nott said, looking around frowning. "Well, we planned Harry teaching us," Hermione spoke up nervously. When the others started to whisper at that, most of them not sounding too sure about that, she continued hastily. "He's the best in defense class in our year," she said. "He also knows a lot more than us about defense, so he's a good choice." Draco Malfoy sneered at that, but before he could say anything about Hermione's exclamation, Nott spoke up. "I guess you are right, Granger," he said gruffly. "Potter is the best in defense we have in our year. He has proven it by winning the Tri-Wizard tournament last year. Still, who will teach Potter so that he can teach us? It's not as if he knows all the spells up to the OWLs, does he?" At that, Hermione looked a little bit uncertain at the crowd. She was surprised when Harry spoke up. "I do know them," he said. "I know not only the spells in defense up to the OWLs, but also at least up to the newts. If I wanted to, I could write my newts tomorrow." Hermione looked at Harry in surprise. She hadn't known that as well. Malfoy frowned. "Can you prove it?" he asked icily. Harry shrugged. Then he gestured to one of the 7th years. "If you don't trust me, I can duel one of your 7th years, or whoever you want me to. If I win, it should prove that I am able to teach you things. If I'm not, then we still can look for another teacher for this defense association," he said, amused. Hermione sent an unsure look at Harry, but the boy didn't look at her at all. The Slytherins exchanged a look with each other, then one of them, a 7th year, stepped forward. "I am willing to duel you, Potter," the 7th year said. Harry looked at the older boy with a cool, assessing eye. Then he nodded, pulled out his wand and raised a dueling platform out of the ground with a casual flick of his wand. The 7th year raised a surprised eyebrow at that. Hermione stared. She had seen Harry perform in class, speaking each spell like the rest of his year did. To see him use magic without saying anything was surprising. At least, the other students in the room exchanged glances with their neighbor at that. Harry, meanwhile, didn't even seem to think that he had done something surprising, because he walked to the platform and hopped on top of it. "Well," he said, turning to the Slytherin 7th year, "you coming?" The Slytherin hesitated for a moment, then he nodded and stepped onto the platform as well. "We need a referee," he said. Harry inclined his head at that, then looked around the room. "Maybe a Ravenclaw or Hufflepuff 7th year?" he asked. One of the Ravenclaws stepped forward. "I'll do it," she said, and Hermione thought that finding a 7th year in this room was no problem at all. It looked as if nearly the whole school had decided to come. She wondered how many of them were willing to tell Umbridge about their little rebellion, but Harry had insisted on asking everybody if they started their little club. In his eyes, it wouldn't be fair if they didn't ask everybody if they decided to teach anybody. So they had spread the word as good as they could. Hermione just wondered how long it would take until Umbridge heard about their doings. The vile woman would use that to add another education decree to those she had already added to the school over the last months. Hermione sometimes wondered if Harry was aiming for the decree. "All right," the 7th year Ravenclaw referee said in that moment. "Ready?" The opponents nodded both. "Begin." The duel, Hermione observed, was somehow anticlimactic. The Slytherin 7th year was good, but he had no chance against Harry. Every spell the Slytherin threw, Harry countered, stopped or dodged. The last one not that often, since it obviously wouldn't show his skills, and the duel was to assert his skills in defense and not solely in dodging. In the end, Harry changed from his defensive stance to the offense. His wand, instead of performing silent counters, suddenly stabbed the air harshly and rapidly. The spells he threw at the 7th year were too fast to counter for the other student. He was felled by the first before the rest even hit. Harry just waited for a moment until the Ravenclaw had proclaimed him the winner of the duel, then he waved his wand again and performed the counter. Harry didn't even look out of breath. "Anybody else?" he asked, amused. The other students, even the Slytherins, shook their head, and some even took a step backwards. It was his Slytherin opponent who spoke up first. "I think you clearly showed us that you can trounce even the 7th years," he said while taking Harry's hand to stand up. "The only thing you need to learn is to step out of the way of a spell instead of countering it." Harry snorted at that. "Normally I would have sidestepped nearly all of your spells," he replied. "I just didn't think that it would have showed up my knowledge if I simply sidestepped everything." The 7th year Slytherin blinked at that, then he nodded slowly, clearly contemplating Harry's answer. "I guess you're right," he said, "and even if you're lying, you know the spells, and that's what we're here to learn. That should be enough." "Well," Hermione batted in at that, "now that we've decided who'll train us, I've got a list for you to write down your name so that we know who's part of this group." She had prepared that paper before, and she was quite happy with that, considering that they had that many people who might go to the new defense professor and tell her about their little group. "The list is hexed," she warned. "Nevertheless, we need to make sure that we know if someone goes squealing on us." The other students looked at each other at that, some looking quite unsure after hearing that announcement. To Hermione's surprise, the Slytherins only nodded, and then the first held out their hand for the quill. "Good idea," the Slytherin said. "That should make people think twice about going to Dear Umbridge." And Hermione wondered if she might have picked some of the Slytherins wrong. After the first signing, the rest swiftly followed. Those who were already done signing were taken aside by Harry, who set them up with a target and some basic spells. "I will start from the beginning," he warned them. "Those who already know the spells show me, and if I'm certain that you are able to cast them, I will give you some others to practice." All in all, Hermione definitely didn't regret to ask Harry to teach. He seemed to have memorized a list of spells or something, because he had no trouble at all to set up even those students who were already able to cast the first spells he had told them to do. Hermione also noticed that some students of the older years knew a lot less spells than others. Harry didn't seem to mind that, his system not based on year but on knowledge. After another hour of training, he stopped everyone. "Well," he said, "that's it for today. Hermione's got some fake galleons for you that will tell you the time of our next meeting the moment we've set it up." "Wait," that was Ginny Weasley. Everyone stopped in whatever they were doing. "What about naming this group?" she asked. Others nodded. Hermione looked at Harry, while Harry clearly thought it over. "All right," he finally said. "I guess we will have to name this group something else than Study Group of Defense to work against the faulty ideas of Ministry employees." Some of the students snorted in amusement at that. Hermione sent Harry an exasperated look. Harry just shrugged as an answer while the students all came back to surround them. "Well, as you wished. The only thing left for today is giving our Defense Association a name," Harry said, slightly amused. Some of the Slytherins exchanged a look at that. "Didn't you already call it Defense Association, Potter?" Malfoy drawled at that, rolling his eyes. Harry just shrugged. "Ginny didn't seem to like it," he replied, amused. Ginny blushed. "I don't think that Defense Association sounds very aggressive," she mumbled. "It doesn't sound like we fight against the stupidity of the Ministry and all." "And you want it to sound aggressive?" Malfoy drawled. Ginny shrugged, but other students nodded. "Aggressive definitely sounds right to me," one of the Ravenclaws replied. "We should at least try to make it sound as if we're unhappy with the Ministry or some such." "So what? You want to call it the Ministry Sucks Group?" Nott said, amused. A lot of the students grinned or chuckled at that. Even Harry's face showed clear amusement. "Something like that definitely would do some good for this group," he said, snorting. A lot of other students nodded. Malfoy sighed at that, oddly resigned already for someone who had been Harry's enemy until just a few months ago. "All right," he drawled, "but I'm not for the Ministry Sucks Group. Find something else." At that, a discussion started and ideas were thrown around. "How about Down with Umbitch Group?" a Gryffindor suggested. "How about We're Learning Anyway Group?" a Ravenclaw replied. "Or Hogwarts United?" a Hufflepuff added. In that moment, a nearly insane grin split Harry's face. It was oddly disconcerting to see, considering that Harry was a lot more stoic since the beginning of the year. Hermione thought she also wasn't the only one seeing that grin. "All right, Potter," Malfoy said. "What did your idiotic brain come up with to call this club?" Everyone quieted at that exclamation, turning to Harry and Malfoy. Harry's grin broadened. "Dumbledore's Army," he said, fletching blinding white teeth at the Malfoy heir. "We're calling it exactly what the Minister is fearing, that Dumbledore is doing. There's definitely nothing more aggressive than adding to the enemy's fears." There was some commotion at that, then a lot of people nodded. "Definitely a good one," a Ravenclaw said. "And we could shorten it to DA so that nobody knows what we're talking about." A lot of the Ravenclaws nodded at that, clearly liking the name. "It also implies that we're one and won't stand for the Ministry's manipulations of our lessons," one of the Hufflepuffs said. Other Hufflepuffs and a lot of Gryffindors nodded their consent. "It's also definitively aggressive," Ginny Weasley said. "I like it." The most of the room nodded at that. Then Harry's exclamation seemed to reach Malfoy's brain. "Dumbledore's Army?" he screeched, his eyes nearly bugging out of his face. "We're not calling this little club Dumbledore's Army. There's Slytherins in the room. There's no way we won't object to that name." Some of the Slytherins nodded at that. Others didn't really seem to care. Harry just shrugged. "We could also call it Dolores Angels," he suggested reasonably. "Like that it's more backwards aggressive, but aggressive nevertheless, considering that we're doing the exact opposite to what the Toad wants us to do." "It should definitely appeal to your Slytherin senses," Ginny Weasley said, frowning. "I wouldn't object to that as well." A lot of people thought that over and nodded. Others looked like they were about to get sick. Malfoy, on the other hand, yelped at that. There was silence in the room for at least a minute or two, then Nott coughed and spoke up when it was obvious that Malfoy wasn't going to do it any time soon. "Dumbledore's Army's fine, Potter," he said, his voice strained. "Dumbledore's Army's fine. The Slytherins could live with the name, as long as they wouldn't have to call themselves Dolores Angels. Every other name was bearable. They might be Slytherins, but there was no way in hell that they would use the name of a pink-wearing toad, especially not if it was combined with calling themselves their angels. Anything but that." "Thought as much," Harry said, grinning. We're simply just using DA, if that's all right with you, Potter," Malfoy said finally, still sounding oddly traumatized. "DA is nice and short, don't you think so too?" Harry's grin was oddly feral at that, something that felt oddly wrong in Hermione's gut. Suddenly she wondered why Harry had insisted on the name Dumbledore's army, and she had the odd feeling that the answer wasn't because he was Dumbledore's man through and through. She also didn't think that Harry decided on the name because of the reason he told the others. He didn't seem to like the headmaster this year that much, so using the headmaster's name had to have a different reason. Sadly enough, Hermione couldn't think of any other reason at all. "Well," Harry said, writing the name on top of the parchment with their names, "then I welcome you all to Dumbledore's army, until next time." With that, the group scattered after receiving their fake galleons. In the end, only Hermione, Neville, Ron and Harry were left. "Harry," Hermione spoke up hesitatingly. Harry, who had been putting away the targets, turned to look at her, the same stoic boy again that he had been all year. "What else do you need, Hermione?" he asked. She hesitated for a moment. "Why did you decide to call this group Dumbledore's army?" she asked. "You didn't seem too fond of Dumbledore since the trial." Harry shrugged. "He's still the leader of the light," Harry said. "He's also the one Fudge and his lackeys fear, so using his name in our group was definitely the best thing to do. This has nothing to do with personal feelings, just with simple facts. It was a logical choice." Hermione couldn't object to that, so she let it go in the end. Maybe she was just paranoid and Harry hadn't meant anything else by using that name. Augusta Longbottom was currently standing in one of the less frequented corridors of the Ministry, looking for everyone else like she belonged there. Nobody even thought about questioning her why she was standing near the estate office. The most people passing guessed that she was waiting for the clerk of the office to return. He was on lunch break currently, after all. If people would have been asked what she wanted with the estate office, then people would have shrugged. She was the Lady Regent of a noble and ancient house. Nobody could ever guess what people like her wanted. Maybe it had something to do with the Longbottom estate. She was its regent, after all. If they had asked Augusta, and if she had been truthful, they would have been stunned by her answer. Augusta Longbottom, the Dowager Longbottom, regent of Longbottom Estate, was currently on the lookout like a child securing its friends while they were preparing a prank. That was definitely nothing anybody would have ever thought the Dowager doing. Not that it was the first time she stood on the lookout, but most people had forgotten her wilder youth after all these decades she had been alive. In that moment, a gangly-looking man with huge glasses rounded the corner. He was clearly on the way to the currently empty estate office. The moment he reached the Dowager Longbottom, she finally left her place. "Tell me, Mr. Appleby, if a family has died out, what will happen to their estates?" Augusta Longbottom asked the clerk. The clerk had been about to return from lunch, but Regulus hadn't yet come out of the office. Augusta felt oddly remembered of her youth and the fact that she always had been the lookout while Charles Potter and Eloise Mintumble had set the pranks. Oddly enough, it made her feel young again. That depends, Madam Longbottom," the clerk stuttered. "If there's a known related family, they will get the estate. If there isn't that, then it might be sold. If it's in a Muggle area, then it might just be left like it is." It was in that moment that she saw the door of the office she had been monitoring opening and a shadow, hidden beneath a delusion charm, left the office. So Augusta decided that she had stopped the clock long enough. "Then I might come by another time to see if there's a free estate of a deceased family I might be interested in sometime in the future," she said haughtily, nodded at the man and then turned and left. The clerk behind her shook his head, sighed, murmured something about damn nobles and their odd ideas before deciding to forget that odd meeting. It simply was not worth to ponder on the nobles and their ideas. Amelia Bones was startled out of her work by the knock on her door. "Come in," she said, quite surprised that when the door opened, an old man was standing in front of it, a man she hadn't seen since her niece had been 11. "Mr. Ollivander," she said, surprised. The old man smiled at her. "Miss Bones," he replied, and then closed the door behind himself. Amelia set down her quill and folded her hands on top of her desk. "How may I help you, Mr. Ollivander?" she asked the old man. She had heard from others that the old man had lost his sanity at the end of the last school holidays, but she hadn't been sure if she could trust those rumors, and Garrick Ollivander's serious face didn't make her feel as if he truly was insane. "I am not sure that you may help me," the old man said, but I decided to come and ask you nevertheless. Amelia raised an eyebrow at that. What are you here for? She asked, confused. Ollivander sighed. The world is changing, Miss Bones, he said. Soon it will change even more. The question I need to ask is, what side will you be on? The minister's, Dumbledore's, or that of Oliver Twist? Amelia widened her eyes at the last question. Oliver Twist? She repeated, surprised. The old man inclined his head. He's the fourth side of this war, he said. I've known this for quite some time now. Amelia stared at the old man. He had solely named 3 sides, but yet talked about the fourth side. It was unusual, and there was just one explanation that fit to that. He's back, isn't he? She asked. You know who? The old man sighed. Yes, he said tiredly, that he is, but he isn't the only one who's back. And this time around I decided to ask you, since the last time you refused to join Albus. She raised an eyebrow at that. My brother joined him, she said darkly. It led to him and his wife never seeing their daughter growing up. I'm an aura, even now that I'm the head of the DMLE. I refuse to follow Dumbledore's idea of stunning spells and second chances. The answer was a smile from a man she had always suspected of being a close friend of Albus Dumbledore. It seems that there's still some brain left in your generation, Miss Bones, he said, amused. I already hoped that you might not see it his way, but hearing it confirmed definitely soothes my mind. She looked at him in surprise at that. It thought that you were a friend of Albus Dumbledore, she said, amused. I always thought that you were one of those who would use a stunning spell first. Garrick Ollivander looked at her in amusement. Have you ever heard of the Resistance? She frowned, but shook her head. Or of the Dragon Division fighting against Grindelwald? This time her eyes widened in surprise. Yes, she said, I heard of them. Her eyes narrowed. They are nothing but a legend. Nobody but Grindelwald ever had a Dragon Division in this war. They were Grindelwald's elite, people we hadn't had a chance against when we met them in battle. Ollivander snorted at that in amusement. That's Dumbledore's tale, he said darkly. It was his way of changing our look on the war. If you would have ever left Britain and asked anyone else in Europe, you might have heard about the Resistance, about the Dragon Division and a lot of other things. Amelia narrowed her eyes at that. If that's so, why doesn't Britain tell the same tale? She asked, confused. Ollivander sighed. Mostly, he said, because Britain saw itself as the winners and didn't want to hear anything about the deeds of all those who worked for the end of the war before it even thought of joining. I was part of the war, Miss Bones. Unlike the most of Britain, I was in the Resistance. I was there when Grindelwald was defeated. I know what happened that day, and it's quite a bit different than what British history says. Amelia looked at the old wand-maker in surprise. He didn't look like he would ever think about fighting in a war in any way or form. She knew for sure that he hadn't fought against Voldemort, at least not on Dumbledore's or the Ministry's side. If you wish to, I can leave you some memories of the final days, the old man said. You should be able to verify them without any trouble. Amelia nodded. She pulled out her pensive, and the wand-maker pulled out some of his memories for her. Tell me, Ollivander, she said while watching him. Why did you come to me? The old wand-maker entered the last strand of memory into the pensive and then looked up to meet her eyes. I came to ask you for an alliance, Miss Bones, he said. I plan to return to the Wizengamot in January, and I decided to search out some people for an alliance before that. I know that you're not allied with Albus Dumbledore or with any Death Eaters, so I decided to search you out for an alliance. Amelia looked at the old wand-maker in surprise. Ollivander hadn't taken their place in the Wizengamot for generations. They had been far too involved with their work to go to the Wizengamot. To hear that after all this time, Ollivander would return to the Wizengamot was quite a surprise for her. Amelia was sure that a lot of people had already forgotten that Ollivander was actually one of them. You want to return to the Wizengamot? She repeated, concerned. The old man inclined his head. It's time, he said. I should have done that years ago. Maybe if I had, Britain would have gone to war a lot faster than it did when Grindelwald was active. For a moment Ollivander seemed to contemplate that, then he shook his head. No, he said, sighing, I would have just been one voice against many. It wouldn't have changed a thing. But now you're going, Amelia said. Ollivander smiled. This time I'm looking for allies first, he said. So you came to me, Amelia said, sighing. You should know that I don't have a lot of allies in the Wizengamot. Even with an alliance with me, you would still be just a voice against many, like you put it. Ollivander just smiled at her. You aren't the only one I plan to ally with, he said, but you are the one whom I have no guarantee that they would ally with me. The others? The most of them have been allied with my house for longer than even Albus Dumbledore is alive. If they're still true to their ancestry, they won't say no. For a moment Amelia hesitated, then she sighed. I will think about it after I watched your memories, she said. Ollivander inclined his head. Just know that I don't plan to ally with Albus Dumbledore or the Ministry. I plan to ally with, let's call the fraction Oliver Twist, he said, sounding a little bit amused at that. In other words, this is about a new fraction, Amelia said. Ollivander just smiled. Miss Bones, he said in a way of saying goodbye. Amelia sighed. It seemed that she wouldn't get further answers. Mr. Ollivander, she replied. He then bowed to her, turned around and left, leaving her with some unseen memories and an important decision to make. So, this is it? Regulus looked around in disgust. The person next to him frowned, her face showing displeasure and some disgust as well. According to the old laws, this is the ancestral ground of the Gaunts, Augusta Longbottom said, sighing. Regulus shook his head. They were filthy rich for centuries, he said. I can't believe that that's all that's left. Augusta raised an eyebrow at that, and the younger man sighed. Yes, ma'am, he said. I remember that the books said that their manor burned down in the 1750s. But I never thought that they didn't even have enough left by then to build at least a decent home, if not a manor. Augusta shrugged. The Gaunts have had long since paid the price for their arrogance, she said. If I remember it rightly, there was even a rumor that they had been cursed since the day they took over Slytherin's headship. Regulus snorted. I read about that rumor, he said, amused. It sounded more like them being punished by the Wizengamot obelisk for a deliberate false family claim and stupidity than a true curse. That observation stopped Augusta dead in her tracks. That sounds surprisingly right, if you take a look at it like that, she said, astonished. There have never been a lot of tries to claim a false family as your own, and even less were stupid enough to repeat that action over and over again, but from what we know about the obelisk's enchantment, ruining the family who tries to do just that is certainly a possibility. For a moment she pondered on that silently. I just wonder why they would even try to do that, she said while shaking her head. Why would they go up to the obelisk in the Wizengamot chamber and try to take on another family's name over and over again if they had claimed to Slytherin and Gaunt? Regulus shrugged while staring at the ground. Except they didn't have Slytherin, but tried to get it nevertheless, he said slowly. The older woman looked at him in surprise. But everybody knows that the Gaunts are the last of Slytherin, she exclaimed. Regulus looked up and in her eyes at that. Maybe, he said slowly, everybody was wrong with that assumption. Augusta stared at the younger man. In the end she shook her head. It doesn't matter right now, she said. We found what we've been looking for. Should we go in, or do you want to go back and tell the professor? For a moment, Regulus looked hesitatingly at the shack in front of them. Then he sighed. It's best I go back to Sal and he'll take a look himself. Who knows what kind of protections are around this place? I might have some abilities when it comes to dark magic, but even I would prefer to have him around when we try to break in. Augusta just nodded at that. He's frightening efficient when it comes to wards and the like, she said. I remember that quite well from my time as his student at Hogwarts. Regulus nodded. That he is, he said, and then shook his head. That also makes him totally different to the last two headmasters of Hogwarts. Augusta frowned at that. Why? She started to ask, but Regulus answered her before she could even finish her question. He took a look at the wards this year, he said. There's a ward book for the school, left to the headmasters of Hogwarts to ensure that the wards they would add to the existing ones wouldn't destroy or intercept the old ones. As far as I know, Sal had checked the wards when he was a professor back in your youth. I don't understand, Augusta said, frowning. If there's a book to make sure that the other wards haven't been harmed, why did you bring up the last two headmasters of Hogwarts and the wards? Regulus grimaced. He checked them again this year just to see if some repair has to be done, he replied. From what I understood, at least one of the last two headmasters refused to read or listen to the book before adding to the wards. They are in a deplorable condition. Sal's not happy at all. He hadn't foreseen the need to repair the wards in that extent at all. Augusta snorted at that, barely refraining from keeping her ladylike composure. I'm not surprised that he didn't plan on that. The wards stood tall for about 1,000 years. I don't think that anyone would have even thought about seeing them in shambles. And yet, here they are, Regulus said, darkly. The older woman nodded, ice in her eyes. And here they are, she agreed. I bet it was Albus' fault. He's always been too arrogant for his own good. Since the day he was named a prodigy and the next coming of Merlin, he's had a big head. His defeat of Grindelwald and the hero worship following it definitely didn't help. The younger black sibling nodded at that. It didn't, he said. Sometimes I'm really glad that a black can never ever ally himself again directly with Dumbledore, at least like that nobody of our family can be ensnared by his grandfatherly act. Augusta raised an eyebrow at that. What about your brother? She asked, surprised. Regulus shrugged. Allied with the Potters, not Dumbledore, he said. I'm quite sure Sirius has been questioning Dumbledore for quite some time now. I truly wonder how long it will take until Sirius has enough and will break the ties. And he will do it. He's a black, even if he refuses to acknowledge it. And blacks don't ally with Albus Dumbledore. Augusta snorted at that in amusement. Then she shook her head. Let's go and get the professor, she said, still slightly amused at the thought that Dumbledore thought someone his ally, who for whatever reason was never allied with him at all. Regulus nodded. Let's, and with that they were off. That night, all over the country, letters were delivered to different people. Adrian Greengrass looked at the letter in his hands before looking up at his wife. I am invited to a full family meeting the coming Saturday, he said. His wife frowned. Who else will come? Her husband shrugged. I will see, he said. I guess I will see. Meanwhile, Lucius Malfoy looked at the newest letter he had received before he squared his shoulders and stepped in front of Riddle, who was currently frothing thanks to the vampire in the candelabra. Lucius decided that he didn't even want to know what that damn vampire had done this time again. My lord, he said hesitatingly. The Dark Lord turned to him, and for a moment, Lucius was sure that he would be crucioed. But then the Dark Lord took a deep breath. This is better important, Lucius, he hissed. Of course, my lord, Lucius replied, gulping. What is it? I need to leave in 3 days' time, my lord, Lucius replied. I was asked to a meeting by some of the lords of the Wizengamot. The Dark Lord's eyes narrowed at that, and Lucius braced himself for the curse. It's important for our cause, Lucius added hastily. For a moment, the Dark Lord just stared at him. As you wish, Lucius, he hissed. You may leave, but until then, Crucio. Somewhere in Scotland, another letter reached a young, dark-skinned boy. The boy read it, then slipped it away and continued eating breakfast. After breakfast, he went to his head of house's office. Sir, he said after he was allowed to enter, I need your permission to leave the castle in 3 days' time. This Saturday, Mr. Zabini? The hooked-nosed man asked. Yes, sir, the youth said. I was asked to attend a meeting of some lords of the Wizengamot. As a new lord myself, I can't refuse. The older man narrowed his eyes at that. Is there a possibility that the meeting you're talking about is in Gringotts, Mr. Zabini? He asked the boy. The youth looked at him in hidden surprise. Sir, he asked. The older man pinched his nose at that before removing a letter himself, opening it and turning it so that the boy could take a look at it. The boy's eyes this time around visibly widened. You as well, sir? He asked in surprise. I could say the same thing, Mr. Zabini, the teacher said dryly. The boy looked at him, this time showing visible amusement. I guess you could, sir, he said. Now am I allowed to go? I guess I will allow it as long as you won't go alone, the older man said dryly. The boy grinned wryly. Would you accompany me, Professor? He asked, amused. I guess I will, the teacher replied, as amused as the youth. The answer was an amused snort. In another part of the castle, another head of house was visited by her student as well. Professor, the boy entering asked hesitatingly, Yes, Mr. Longbottom, the teacher replied. The boy entered fully and closed the door. I need to leave the castle next Saturday, he said. Mr. Longbottom, you are a student and this is part of my duty as the new head of my house, the boy replied. My grandmother decided to remove my father from the inheritance line, meaning that I am the current Lord of Longbottom now that I have turned 15. My grandmother might still be my regent and able to decide for me until the Wizengamot meeting in January at least, but that doesn't mean that I don't have any responsibility as the current head of House Longbottom. Mr. Longbottom, your grandmother decided that I had a right to come to the meeting. Our family has been invited too, Neville Longbottom replied strongly. If I'm not allowed to go, my grandmother will come and fetch me. It's your choice, Professor. His head of house frowned at that, but in the end gave it. All right, Mr. Longbottom, she said. You will use the flue in my office and your grandmother will wait for you on the other side. I will make sure of that. Neville Longbottom inclined his head. Of course, Professor, he said. I will tell my grandmother of your conditions. He bowed stiffly, a mannerism he hadn't shown before, and then left the office. Minerva McGonagall frowned, wondering why Longbottom suddenly took an interest in his lordship when he hadn't shown any before now. What had changed? She wouldn't get an answer for quite some time. So, this is it, Harry said, looking at the shack Regulus and Augusta had led him to. It was Friday afternoon after class, and Harry had decided that it was the right time to leave the wards of Hogwarts to get to the Horcrux hidden in the shack Reg and Augusta had found. He didn't think that he would be missed for at least a few hours, so the present time was the best time. Well, Harry amended inwardly, I won't be missed much. He was quite aware that Hermione was still trying to find out what he was up to. Guess that one time in the future she will find out, Harry thought. But that's the future, it won't be now, so I shouldn't concern myself with that right now. With that thought, Harry returned to his previous doings, looking at a rundown shack. Doesn't look much, he mused aloud. Yes, Reg said, we didn't enter or anything. I might be quite good when it comes to dark magic and wards, but you are a lot better than me, and since we doubted that the Dark Lord went easy on the protection, we decided to call you in before trying to enter. Harry nodded. He closed his eyes, concentrating on the magic in the air in front of him. It didn't take long for him to pick up the oily feeling of Tom Riddle's infected magic. Harry grimaced. He was sure that he wouldn't get rid of the bad taste of destroyed magic for a few days at least. Nothing tasted as bad as magic that had been infected by evil. Nevertheless, he continued to feel for the magic until he had a hold of the ward line. Then he unshrunk his staff and then drew with it some runes and hieroglyphs in the soft ground along the ward line. That done, he activated the runes. One moment he could see nothing but the shack behind the wards. The next the wards were distinctly and visibly in front of him. The dome they built was surrounded by a colorful iridescent bubble, emblazed with Chinese characters, hieroglyphs, runes and parcel runes. Then the glowing construct sunk in the wards themselves and illuminated them, but instead of the colorful swirling and twirling of the bubble, the wards were a sickly-looking grey, mixed with some ill-looking washed-out sparks of color here and there. There were also some shoddy runes and parcel runes flying around, and some parts of the wards were nearly transparent or blackened. Harry raised an eyebrow. Seems that Tommy Boy is a lot, he said, but he's definitely not a ward master. You and Augusta could do a better ward than that, Reg. Reg and Augusta exchanged a glance. I'm rubbish at wards, Sal, Reg finally said. I've never even tried to build a ward, Augusta added. Exactly, Harry said, and you would still be better in building them than Tommy. Reg snorted amused. So, those wards are child's play? He asked. Harry waved it off. No, he said. They would have kept out nearly everyone he wanted to keep out. But you said that they're rubbish, Harry intercepted Augusta's words. They are, I just have to do this. With that he twisted the hand with his staff so that his staff hit one of the shoddy-looking parcel runes. And they're gone, he finished, while the wards groaned nearly silently before crashing down. Regulus and Augusta might not have been able to see the wards until they started to collapse, but the feeling of sudden light-heartedness would have clued them in anyway. Regulus stared at the property and the remains of the ward, some shriveling black runes along the ward line. You just brought down a ward the Dark Lord built with a single strike, he said in disbelief. Wards like these damn wards kept out the Order of the Phoenix and the Ministry in the last war, and you brought them down with a single strike. Harry just raised an eyebrow at the other man. You just confirmed to me that the Ministry and Dumbledore's little gang were a lot more ineffective in their endeavors to stop Tom than they tried to make others believe, he said, shaking his head. I already believed them incompetent, but this takes the cake. Augusta snorted, amused. Good thing that they weren't fighting alone then, she said. Harry raised an eyebrow. I have actually no idea what you mean, Augusta, he said. The old witch just returned the raised eyebrow. Of course, Professor, she said. I'm quite sure that you just sat by and did nothing, like you sat by and did nothing while we fought against Grindelwald. For a moment, Harry said nothing. Then he sighed in defeat. I told you before that I'm no hero, Augusta, he said softly. I would have never fought against Grindelwald like Albus Dumbledore did. Augusta just snorted. And like I said before, I don't know where you were, I don't know what you did, but I know that you did everything you could to shield the innocent. You fought Grindelwald. I might have no idea how or where, but you did. Don't you dare to deny it. That doesn't count, Harry replied while shaking his head. Whatever I did, it never counted. Regulus sneered at that. Well, he said, bitterness in his voice, that's not a first. When it comes to Albus Dumbledore, a lot of things don't count. Augusta raised an eyebrow at that. Black? She asked, a little bit confused, looking at him with the question clearly displayed in her eyes. Regulus returned her gaze evenly. My name, Regulus, he said, was chosen to honor the fallen, my brother's name Sirius as well. Mother might have never agreed with my grandfathers when it came to their outlook in life, but even she acknowledged the strength and power of Sirius and Regulus Black. Augusta looked at him in surprise, and Regulus continued. I am proud to be Regulus Arcturus Black, he said. As a child I might not have understood what my name stood for, but when I searched for a way to extract the Horcrux, I found my great-grandfather's journal. I am proud to be a Regulus, because I know that it was his sacrifice that freed the world of Grindelwald, and I will never forgive Dumbledore for taking his right of acknowledgement from him. Harry just sighed at that and clapped Reg on the back. Then he turned and looked at Augusta. Whatever I did back then, he said, doesn't count. Please, leave it at that for now. With that he stepped away from them and over the now vanished ward line into the property. Augusta and Regulus followed him hesitatingly. They reached the shack without any trouble. Augusta grimaced at the snake nailed on the door, but Harry ignored it. He looked over the shack, and when he was sure that nothing else was attached to the wood, like a hex or curse, he opened the door. The inside of the shack was nearly empty, but it stank of dark magic. Regulus shuddered when entering, clearly uncomfortable with the heavy evilness in the air. Augusta, on the other hand, refused to even set one foot inside the door. I'm waiting outside, she declared, shuddering. I refuse to be anywhere inside this hovel. Harry just nodded at that. He wasn't surprised. Augusta was a very light witch, meaning that she was extremely sensitive to the evil in the air. He wasn't about to force her inside a building to have her sick up on the floor somewhere because she couldn't stand being in there anymore. We have to search the shack, Harry said. Concentrate on areas heavy with evil magic. Reg nodded grimly. There might be some, he said. I don't think that the Gaunts were anywhere near the light for at least the 5 last generations. They were always a bit stuck up and very interested in the illegal aspects of magic, Harry replied, sighing. I guess it is just natural that in the end it was the greed that destroyed their family. Regulus looked up in surprise at that. So their try to take on the Slytherin legacy brought them down? He asked, interested, remembering his and Augusta's guesses from the last time they had been near the shack. Harry just waved it off. Let's search this hovel, he said instead. Maybe if we're lucky we even can destroy it today as well. In the end they found it beneath one of the floorboards. It was hidden inside a metal box, and it had been Regulus who found it. All right, Harry said the moment they had the metal box pulled out safely. The floorboard and the metal box both had been hexed, but Harry and Regulus both knew enough of the dark arts to be careful while searching, so that in the end nobody got hurt. It was Harry who dispelled the curses on the box, and Regulus who pulled it out from beneath the floorboards. Now we just have to destroy it, Reg said, looking at the innocent box in his hands. Harry sighed and nodded. They left the shack. Do you have it? Augusta asked immediately. She had been pacing in front of the shack, feeling too ill to even think about going in while at the same time refusing to leave the other two alone. We do, Reg replied, and we're now going to a place where we can destroy it. Harry sighed. Unfortunately, you can't come with us, he said. The place is hidden beneath a Fidelius. We could use another place, but there the runes are already drawn. It will take only minutes compared to the hours it would take to prepare a new room. Augusta just nodded. That's all right, she said. I don't actually mind that much. Just thinking what this box contains makes me ill. I don't need to see it as well. I'm happy with the knowledge that it will be destroyed by tomorrow. The other two nodded, and then the group disbanded. Augusta returned home while the other two went to Grimmauld Place. With the help of Creature, they entered from the street into the room directly. There, Harry opened the box, dropped the content, a ring with an oddly familiar stone, onto the floor, in the middle of a circle, and then started the ritual. The room-turned-ritual chamber was still exactly like they left it the last time. Runes, hieroglyphs, and other symbols adorned every square of the room. Stand aside, Reg, Harry whispered, and Regulus Black, who had gone near the ring to take an interested look at it, went to another circle painted on the floor right behind the door. Let's begin, Harry said before he started to draw runes out of blue fire in the air. A moment later they vanished, and with them the little noise from outside you could hear vanished also. And then the chanting began. Regulus himself watched from his secured place at the outer side of the ritualistic circle. This was the third time he saw the ritual, and he was as awestruck as he had been the 2 times before. He could not look away, even when the light, the runes and lines began to glow and started to hurt his eyes. Unearthly. That was the only description he was able to. And then the chanting in a language Regulus could not place stopped, and a soft hissing sound penetrated the silence. Suddenly a black fog erupted from the 2 objects in the middle of the circle. The fog tried to take on a different shape, but white glowing light hindered the forming. Again a chanting was heard, this time filled with soft hisses and words that sounded like Arabian. The purifying. Then black and green fire erupted from the ring and reached for the black fog. A high-pitched shriek could be heard when the fire began to consume the fog. Then the fog vanished in the flames. It took another moment, and then the unnatural fire also vanished, leaving behind the untainted and yet still oddly eerie ring with the black stone. Harry sighted and disabled the runes and the runic circle again. He picked up the ring and pulled out a leather cord to secure it on it. After that he pulled the leather cord over his head and hid the ring beneath his clothing. Then he simply fell to his knees, totally spent. Regulus left his corner to hurry to Harry's side. "Are you okay?" he asked. Harry nodded. "I am," he replied. "Just tired. Help me to bed?" Regulus rolled his eyes fondly at that, called for Creature so that they could leave without being found. The moment they were outside, he picked up Harry, apparated them to Hogwarts, and then proceeded to smuggle his already sleeping companion inside the Gryffindor tower to put him to bed. "Thank Merlin, it's dinner time," he mumbled to himself. "Otherwise I don't believe that I would have been able to bring you up here without being found." He tucked in the other man and then turned into his cat form and hid beneath the bed. Half an hour later, Harry's friends found him in his bed. "There he is," Ron said, amused, "sleeping." Hermione huffed. "You don't think he's been there all the time just sleeping away, do you?" she asked with narrowed eyes. Ron shrugged. "Why not?" he asked. "He said something about not feeling too good to me sometime at lunch. I guess he truly meant it." Hermione huffed again and then left. Ron followed her with his gaze before turning back to his sleeping friend. "Don't think that she caught on that I was lying this time," he said. "You know, Harry, you were right. She's a bit controlling." And with a shake of his head he went to his own bed and pulled out a Quidditch magazine to read. "Honestly," he mumbled, again shaking his head. "Bet he was wanking or some such." Meanwhile his friend slept on, oblivious to the world. The next Saturday was the 2nd Saturday in December. That day Severus Snape excused himself from the castle, telling his employer that he had to accompany a student who had a meeting in Gringotts. Albus Dumbledore didn't even think about questioning it. So Severus and Blaise Zabini left the castle without any trouble at all. Meanwhile, another student left the castle as well. Minerva McGonagall wasn't too happy about that. In her opinion, Neville was far too young to take on the responsibility of a lord. Considering that Neville's father was still among the living, Neville didn't even have the excuse to have to take up his lordship. Even with his father incapacitated in St. Mungo's, the Longbottom family still could count him as their head. In Minerva's opinion, it was ridiculous that the heir would take over when he was barely 15 instead of waiting until after he turned 17, something that Minerva saw as a far more reasonable age when it came to managing an estate. But the Doway Longbottom had decided, and Neville seemed inclined to follow her lead instead of Minerva McGonagall's wishes. "Do you truly think that it's wise to take over your lordship now, Mr. Longbottom?" she asked the boy anyway when he entered her office to flew to the leaky cauldron. "You still have the choice to beg out. I could tell your grandmother—" "No, thank you, Professor," Neville replied. "I understand that you are concerned for me, especially in times like we are living in now, but I am certain— But you don't have to—" "I'm quite aware of my duties and rights as an heir," Neville replied, and for the first time Minerva McGonagall had known him, he showed the bravery that had sorted him into Gryffindor. "Not taking over would indeed be possible for me," the boy continued, "but it wouldn't be advisable, especially in the current dark times. The old houses have to stand strong, and Longbottom would be looked down upon if I stepped back and hid behind my grandmother's robes. You should know this, Professor. You are, after all, also part of the Wizengamot." Minerva McGonagall frowned at that. "I am not, Mr. Longbottom," she objected. "My family is common." She was surprised when the heir of Longbottom raised an eyebrow at that, incredulously. "How did you figure that, Professor?" he asked, a little bit amused. Minerva's frown just deepened. "If we had a place in the Wizengamot, my father would have told me," she answered him earnestly. The Longbottom heir just snorted. "Except that he might not have known," he said. "As far as I know, McGonagall hasn't claimed their seat in centuries." Minerva gawked at him. "Mr. Longbottom," she finally exclaimed, "I assure you that my family doesn't have a seat." "Maybe you should look up your ancestry, Professor," Neville told her. "You might be surprised when you take a look at the families in the Wizards' Council." "Of course, Mr. Longbottom," Minerva replied, not sure if she should believe the boy or accuse him of lying. The Longbottom heir had not shown a tendency to lie before, so she couldn't dismiss him right out. "You're welcome, Professor," the boy said. "Please be advised that I might be interested in an alliance if you decide to take up your inheritance." And with that, the boy stepped into the flames, and with a shout of "leaky cauldron," he was gone before Minerva could even think about a reply. For a moment Minerva was inclined to look up the Longbottom heir's claim, then she dismissed it. She knew that Albus Dumbledore had studied the Wizards' Council and all the names that were associated with it in his youth. He would have told her if he had found out that her last name had been among those families, wouldn't he? Lucius Malfoy swaggered contentedly into the room in which he would meet his new family today. It felt great to be rid of the Dark Lord for a day, even if it meant to meet people he had never met before. Next to him was walking Narcissa, his beautiful wife. Her face was grim, and she kept shooting him glances. Lucius inwardly grimaced when he remembered what this was about. She had cornered him the day before yesterday, after finding the letter he had received about the meeting in Gringotts. "Tell me, Lucius," she said, looking at him with a gaze that made Lucius think with dread about sleeping on the hard couch in his lounge instead of his warm bed. "What is this?" He had regarded the letter in her fingers carefully, before finally deciding that the answer to her question wasn't worth sleeping on the couch. So he explained everything to her, the contact of his lord, the inquiry if the Grand Family and his decision to join. She listened to everything with a stony expression on her face, and when he finished, she threw him an evil look. "And you thought that I shouldn't know about anything of this?" she asked him regally. Lucius frowned. "This doesn't concern you, sissy," he said. "This is an offer for the Malfoy family. You might be my wife, but you weren't born into the Malfoy family." He meant it. Things like alliances had always been made by the ruling head of the family in the Malfoy family. He saw no reason to change that now. Narcissa just looked at him darkly until he had to force himself not to shrink into himself. He guessed that it was her black blood that made her scary as hell even without a wand in her hand. "I'm sorry, sissy," he said, sighing. "I should have consulted you." You should, she said, especially considering that your last choice led to us housing that man in our manor. Lucius wanted to ask her if she meant the vampire or the Dark Lord, but if he had to be honest, he already knew the answers to that question. The vampire might be the one to grate on everybody's nerves, but it was the Dark Lord who didn't have the decorum to not react to the vampire's loud mouth. I am sorry, Sissy, he said again, empathizing his words carefully. His wife's eyes just narrowed at that. I bet you are, she said coolly. At least you will be after 2 or 3 nights on the sofa. But Sissy, don't you dare to butt Sissy me, Lucius, she cried. Who knows what kind of trouble you got our family in this time? I know what I'm doing, Sissy, Lucius replied heatedly. Her cold stare put out the fire in his argument quite effectively. I will believe it when I see it, she said, and for your sake I hope I will see it when I accompany you to your meeting in Gringotts on Saturday. Lucius nodded. Of course you will. He placated her. Then her words caught up to him, and his eyes widened a fraction. Wait, accompany me? He repeated. Sissy, this is the first meeting of the family. It's solely for the heads and grown-up heirs, nobody else. She just stared at him emotionlessly until he gulped and relented. I guess it can't hurt to ask them if they would mind you sitting in, he said. You are my wife, after all. Until Draco is of age, you will be my second when it comes to important decisions. So now Lucius Malfoy, pure blood and political animal, was walking down the street towards Gringotts with his wife on his arm. If anybody of the other Death Eaters ever found out that he brought his wife to a meeting like that, he would never live it down. They would all laugh at him for being unable to handle a single meeting with potential new allies on his own. Still, Lucius guessed that he could live with that if it meant to secure himself some new important allies for his political endeavors. Tissy, he said shortly before entering Gringotts, will you at least consent to waiting a bit until you follow me into the meeting room? Narcissa sent him a dark glance, but in the end she nodded. 3 minutes, she said. That's all you get. I'm not interested in you getting our family in even more trouble than you already did. Do you understand? Lucius did the only sensible thing when he heard that laden question. Yes, dear, he said, inclining his head. As you wish, dear. She sent him the evil eye for those words anyway, but didn't say anything else. Lucius counted that as a plus in his books. Then they reached the door to the meeting chamber. Lucius took a deep breath, straightened his robes, and then put his hand on the door to open it. He was nervous. Not that he showed it in any way or form, but he was also quite sure that he would be content when he finally found out what new families he had gained as allies through his latest stunt of accepting the potential Grand Family as his own. Of course, just belonging to a Grand Family was an honor, but honor was never enough for Lucius Malfoy. He wanted power, and a Grand Family with all its members was the surest way to gain power without being dependent on the Dark Lord's winning. Maybe he could even sway the other members of the family to see the whole issue of blood purity his way. Or maybe not. Lucius Malfoy stopped dead in the door to the conference room before he could actually walk inside his personal version of hell. For a moment he contemplated to turn around and run. Then he remembered that he was subjected to the control of his head of house, and because of that was looking for a way out of the Dark Lord's control that wouldn't kill him before the man noticed that Lucius couldn't finance him anymore, and had also lost the power of his name within the ministry. Lucius gulped. Then he stepped inside the room. 3 minutes. He only had to endure 3 minutes in his personal hell without anyone by his side. If Lucius had known who was waiting behind the door, he would have told Narcissa to enter with him. At least like that he wouldn't have been the only one scrutinized by the waiting crowd. Both the Longbottom matriarch as well as the Weasley patriarch looked at him with interest in their eyes. Their grandchildren and children next to them, on the other hand, showed clear signs of suspicion. Lucius suppressed a flinch at the cold eyes of the eldest Weasley children watching him. Definitely his version of hell. Madam Longbottom, he greeted the older woman before forcing himself to greet the other family in the room as well. Weasley, the man inclined his head. Mr. Malfoy, he said, sounding oddly civil compared to their previous interactions. The Dowager Longbottom followed the Weasleys' lead and greeted Lucius as well. Lucius took a deep breath and closed the door behind him. I guess you are here for the meeting as well, Madam Longbottom, Mr. Weasley? He forced himself to ask nicely. Indeed we are, Mr. Malfoy, the Dowager replied. I am surprised that you decided to accept the invitation for your house, Mr. Malfoy. Lucius inwardly grimaced at that inquiry. Somebody forced me to think over my current alliances, he finally replied evenly. Some things happened, and I wasn't given that much of a choice in the end. Oh, the Dowager Longbottom said. Did your lord feel dissatisfied with the state of the British branch of the family? Lucius inwardly grimaced again. The most members of the Wizengamot had no idea that he was just the head of a branch family, but there had always been some exceptions. Lucius should have guessed that the Dowager Longbottom was one of them. It is not him I seek to flee, Lucius finally settled on unhappily. But I never thought that my try to flee would end up as a meeting with such opposing elements to my own stance. The Dowager raised an eyebrow at that. I guess that you were talking about your idea of blood purity, she said coldly. Lucius closed his eyes. Maybe he had been wrong. This meeting didn't look at all like something he wanted to join. He was quite aware that there was no way that he could sway either the Dowager or Weasley to his side of the blood purity issue. Maybe it had been a mistake to come here. He guessed that even in his current situation there had to be another way to escape the Dark Lord without having to go traitor to all his beliefs. Madam, he said, I am quite aware that you and your cohorts don't care for the good of the wizarding world. In your eyes, the Muggle-borns should run rampant, unchecked, unpunished until the day we are exposed to the Muggle world because of one of them. I am sorry, madam, but I can't stand for this. He wanted to excuse himself, but before he could, his 3 minutes were up. The others had exchanged a look after hearing his speech, and that was the moment Narcissa decided to enter the room. Lucius, dear, she said before greeting the others. Madam Longbottom, Mr. Weasley, Heir Longbottom, Heir and Heir Secundus Weasley. Then she smiled. Madam Malfoy, Lucius's opponents answered in greeting, making Narcissa's smile even more pronounced. I see that Lucius found quite some interesting company today, Narcissa continued, sounding oddly unconcerned by the fact that Lucius and she were outnumbered and in the middle of a bunch of very light-orientated wizards and witches. The others in the room exchanged another glance, and Lucius looked at his wife, begging her with his eyes to help him to leave this room without losing his face. He was quite sure that there might be other ways to get rid of the Dark Lord, somewhere, somewhen. Instead of listening to his pleading glance, Narcissa turned towards the Heir Longbottom. Heir Longbottom, she said amiably, I heard that you are unusually good with plants from my son. Tell me, are you planning to do something with herbology? I heard that there's currently quite lack of potions ingredients suppliers. Not a lot children these days want to work with plants. Lucius looked in betrayal at his wife. I don't actually know quite just yet, the Longbottom heir said, blushing. Narcissa smiled, but before she could betray her husband further, the door opened again, and Adrian Greengrass entered. He raised an eyebrow at the current inhabitants of the room. I'm quite surprised that everyone's still standing, he said. Lucius and Arthur exchanged an uneasy glance, both remembering quite vividly their last meeting. Then they hurriedly looked the other way when they noticed what they had been doing. I'm still waiting for the head to show up, since I am sure that there has to be a mistake, Lucius settled on. I don't think that anybody would have thought about adding blood traitors and a decent family like mine to a grand family together. Adrian Greengrass raised an eyebrow at that. Arthur Weasley, on the other hand, spluttered. Well, if you mean with decent family Death-Eater scum like you, then yes, I'm quite certain that there has to be indeed a mistake, Arthur retorted. Lucius sneered. Narcissa sighed. And here I thought they were able to play well together, she said. Indeed, another man said, nodding. Lucius turned around at the voice. Severus Snape was standing in the doorway next to Blaise Zabini. Well, it is quite entertaining to watch. Another voice spoke up, and it was then that Lucius Malfoy noticed for the first time that there was another person in the room for what he guessed, longer than anybody else. The young man, Lucius' head of house, had been standing in one of the corners, leaned against the wall while watching them. Especially because they are each other's reason to be here, the young man continued. I had the choice to invite neither or both, since they are both about the same degree when it comes to measuring the relation to this house. Adding to that they are cousins through this family, and I wonder why they go against each other instead of working with each other like cousins should. Lucius stared horrified at an equally horrified Arthur. Or did both of you forget wizarding etiquette and traditions to keep warring within the family? The words of Lucius' head of house were sharp, and like a knife they entered Lucius's gut and twisted his insides. "I'm quite sure that my husband knows how to behave towards cousins," Narcissa said, and her glance was as piercing as the head's words. "I do indeed, dear," he said, swallowing hard. Adrian Greengrass snorted. "This might turn out quite an interesting meeting," he said, amused. "Quite interesting indeed." Lucius felt a shiver running down his spine when hearing those words. "Of course it will," his head of house said. "After all, today is the day you will fully swear yourself to the family. Today is the last day you can back out. After that you are part of the family, and you will act like part of the family." The head looked at all of them. "It is today that you will choose." His eyes travelled to Lucius. Tom Marvolo Riddle or this family, then ghosted over Severus to penetrate the Weasley head's eyes. Albus Dumbledore or this family, again the head's eyes travelled, this time meeting Adrian Greengrass's and Blaise Zabini's gaze. Neutrality or this family, his eyes shifted to the long bottoms. Staying on the light side or coming to the grey of this family. He then looked at all of them again. "This decision won't be easy," he said. "And yet I have to force you to make it today. I contacted you beforehand. I asked you to decide already. Back then you could go back, you could turn over your decision and return to the life you led before." Lucius shivered at those words. He knew that this was the last hurdle. The moment he accepted, he would be part of the family. His son would be part of this family, his grandchildren, great-grandchildren, and all the following generations. And it was in Lucius' hands to decide their fate. "You know my conditions for this family," the head said. "You all decided that you can follow them when I asked you first. Now it is your time to decide if you can live in this family. I can't and won't make the decision for you. It is you who will decide." When he stopped, it was surprisingly Blaise Zabini who spoke up first. "I still have some questions," he said, hesitatingly, and when their potential head of house nodded, he took a deep breath and then formulated what was on his mind. "If I, as the head of Zabini, decide to give asylum to another heir, will the Grand family back me, or will I have to stand on my own against the head of the other family?" he asked. The head looked a bit amused at that, but answered anyway. "If you ask, this family will help," he said. "I don't plan to build a dictatorship, but a family. Family members help each other." Zabini nodded. "Just one other question. Shouldn't you have announced the family in front of the Wizengamot first, before inviting us?" he asked. "I looked it up, and that seemed to be the usual approach." Their head shrugged. "It's the current approach, yes," he said, "but it's not the traditional one. This, what I have done, is what our forefathers did until the ministry came into being. I don't care much for the new rule, and since the old one is just forgotten, not prohibited, I decided to found this family like it would have been founded a few hundred years ago. I think that giving people time to actually decide if they want to be part of the family or not is quite helpful sometimes." The young Lord Zabini nodded. "Then I guess I have to thank you for taking this approach," he said. The head of house inclined his head, then he looked at the others. "Any other questions?" When nobody said anything else, the Heather left his corner to walk up to his desk and lean against this one. "Then it's time for you to decide," he said. "This family or your old life, what should it be?" Lucius looked around at that. His eyes met Severus, but the potions master's eyes were unreadable. What should it be, indeed? Did he truly want to leave the Dark Lord? The question was surprisingly easy to be answered when he looked into Narcissa's eyes. His wife was staring at him, quite likely wanting to bring him to say yes by frightening him to death with her glare. Did he truly want to give up his views on blood purity? But then the head of the Grand family in planning had no condition when it came to that issue, so Lucius actually didn't have to give up anything at all if he didn't want to. Still, all those questions were just there to stall. Lucius already knew that direst consequence of choosing the Grand family. It was this he had to decide over, not the issue with the Dark Lord, not his views on blood purity. No, the greatest issue he had was far worse. Could he accept the Weasleys as cousins? What a horrible question to even have to consider. And yet here he was, considering it in earnest with his wife's eyes glaring daggers inside his skull. Lucius turned to look around the room again. The dowager and her grandson were exchanging glances as well, determination in their eyes. It looked like they were already way on their way to decide. The Weasleys nodded to each other. They also seemed to be sure what they wanted to do. Lucius shuddered just at the thought of them deciding for being his cousins. Adrian Greengrass stared up to the ceiling, his face unreadable, and Blaise Zabini already stepped forward bravely. The young lord took a deep breath and closed his eyes for a moment, before he opened them again to look at their potential head of house. "I, Blaise Emilius Zabini, Lord of Zabini," he started, "swear my line to you and your family. Thus I decide, from today on until your family releases us or we vanish into nothingness." A shining, slightly misty and see-through crest appeared over the young lord's head at his words. It was the crest of the Zabinis, a silvery spider on a black grounding. "I, Salvazahar." Lucius couldn't hear the rest of his head's name and house when the secrecy magic took hold of his head's oath. "Swear to take in your family, Lord Zabini, into mine. We will be your shield if you need shielding, your weapon if you need defense, your family in every regard you need us to be. We will protect you, we will provide for you and guide you. We will help you in your endeavors and support you in any way you need us to, as long as you follow our guidance and rules. This so I swear, from today on until you beg to leave or my family vanishes into nothingness." When the oath ended, the now familiar crest of a snake wrapped around a lily appeared to spear the Zabini crest. Both crests vanished into a slight show of glittery mist. Lucius was impressed. He could barely believe that the young boy had dared to go first when it came to declaring his alliance with the Grand Family. The feeling of being glared at made Lucius look to his side. His wife stared at him, her eyes basically threatening with the couch for the rest of his life if Lucius dared to back out today. Lucius gulped. Then the young Longbottom heir nodded towards his grandmother before stepping forwards. "I, Neville Frank Longbottom, heir of Longbottom," he intoned, "with the leave of my grandmother Augusta Carlotta Longbottom, regent of House Longbottom, swear my line to you and your family. Thus I decide, from today on until your family releases us or we vanish into nothingness." This time the Longbottom crest appeared, and like before it was speared by the crest of the Grand Family, when Salvazar accepted and spoke his own oath. Then, with a nod from both of his oldest sons, Arthur Weasley stepped forward. "I, Arthur Septimus Weasley, head of Weasley," he intoned, "regent of the House Pruitt until my second-born is allowed to carry the lordship, swear my line and my regent line to you and your family. Thus I decide, from today on until your family releases us or we vanish into nothingness." Lucius blinked at that. Pretet. The Pruitt family was quite influential. Even after they died out in the male line, maybe being forced to call the Weasleys cousins wouldn't be too bad if everyone knew that the Weasleys were the last of the Pruitts as well. Before he could think about it a bit more, Severus Snape stepped forward. "I, Severus Tobias Snape, Lord of Prince," he intoned while grimacing a little at the mention of his second name and last name, "swear my line to you and your family. Thus I decide, from today on until your family releases us or we vanish into nothingness." Lucius stared at his fellow Death Eater. He definitely hadn't even considered that the other man would swear the oath. He had been quite surprised to see the dour man at the meeting, but for him to actually join, Narcissa shoved him. He turned towards her, and for a moment he felt his innards freeze at the gaze she sent him. It was quite clear what she wanted him to do. Lucius shuddered. He still didn't want to be a cousin to the Weasleys. Then Adrian stepped forward as well, determination on his face. "I, Adrian Heracles Greengrass," he intoned, "swear my line to you and your family. Thus I decide, from today on until your family releases us or we vanish into nothingness." Lucius slumped inwardly. He would be dead if he refused. The Dark Lord might not be the one killing him, but he would be dead anyway. Narcissa would make sure of that if he refused to go this last step. He stepped forward. "I, Lucius Abraxas Malfoy, head of Malfoy," he intoned, fully aware of the approving glances Narcissa was now sending him. "Swear my line to you and your family. Thus I decide, from today on until your family releases us or we vanish into nothingness." Seemed like Lucius would live in his personal hell for the rest of his life. He was the cousin to a Weasley, Alastair Moody stumbled upon Harry James Potter when the later returned from somewhere off the ground. This time around, the ex-Auror just raised an eyebrow at that boy. "Seems like you're not always where you should be, Potter," he said. The boy just returned his gaze evenly. "I asked her when we got to the cave." "And you are?" he asked with a raised eyebrow. Moody snorted at that. "Guess not," he said amused, "but you're a little too young to amble around the world without an escort." The answer was just another amused glance by the boy. "I'm old enough to go where I went," he replied. "Did you need anything, Moody?" The Auror's gaze darkened at that. Lad," he said, "I need to know where you got that information from you gave me." For a moment, the boy seemed to consider it, but in the end he shook his head. "No," he said, "I'm sorry, but I won't tell you how I got the information just now. Go and find your own answers, Moody." The ex-Auror just raised an eyebrow at that. "And how do you think I should do that?" he asked. The boy crooked his head. "Go and ask Sirius for the journals of his grandfather and great-grandfather. You could even suggest to him to read them as well. I'm sure they are enlightening," the boy replied. "Go to your own uncle and ask him, ask people outside of Britain, whatever. Just go out and find your own answer, and when you have it, return to me and I will tell you whatever you want to know." Moody raised an eyebrow at the suggestions. One particular intrigued him. "My uncle?" he asked. "What do you know about my uncle?" The boy just shrugged. "His name is Jerome Delacour," he said. "You're not related by blood, but you called him uncle nearly all your life." Then the gaze of those unusual green eyes intensified. "Everything else will have to wait until you found your own answers," the boy said. "Good day, Auror Moody." "Wait a moment, lad," Moody called after Harry James when the boy passed by him. "I've still some questions left." The boy's eyes narrowed. "I won't talk about the ward scheme you found," he said. "And I also won't talk about the fact that I can bring Sirius to do something by acting like Snape." Moody's eyes narrowed at that. "How do you—" The boy just sighed. "I'm not a child, Moody," he said warily. "Everyone else might treat me like one, but that doesn't mean I am. I've put up with your spying for months now. I let you watch me and ignored you. I even let you take my ward, even if that meant some extra work for me to ensure that Dumbledore could not meddle with it if you gave it to him." "I didn't, lad," Moody replied. "I solely showed it Bill Weasley." The Potter child nodded at that. "I know," he said. "If you had gone to the headmaster with this, we wouldn't have this discussion. If you had, I would have stopped your snooping back then." And as odd as it was to hear such a threat from a child, Moody believed him. He believed him that he would have stopped Moody. That simple thought made Moody shiver a bit. He knew himself well enough, and if he believed a threat, then that meant that he believed the person who threatened him had the actual ability and power to be a threat to his person. He shivered again. Harry James just returned his gaze evenly. "I let you take a look at the man behind the mask, a look at who I am without being waylaid by the headmaster or others," the boy said. "Now it's your turn. Find out the truth for yourself, and then choose your side. Until then, don't bother to try and get the answers from me." "Lad," Moody called again when the boy turned around to continue on his way, "I need to know. Just tell me one thing. Just one thing about my father and how this all fits together with your hatred for Albus. You don't understand, lad. I might be able to get the history, but I won't understand why you suddenly abhor Albus if you don't tell." "It didn't go as planned," Harry James said, seemingly without context. "I was too late to shield him. In the end, it's my fault that he died. I'm sorry." "It didn't go as planned," another tired and haggard man said when the first one couldn't say anything anymore. "I was too late to shield him. In the end, it's my fault that he died." Moody nearly stumbled when he was hit with the flashback to the day his father died. The boy just looked at him pityingly. "I'm sorry," Harry James repeated. With that, the boy walked off. "Seems I truly have to contact my uncle." Moody mumbled to himself. "I definitely need to know what happened back then and how the lad fits into all that." Best was that he would get in touch with his uncle immediately. Long past timeline from year 1411 to 1534 AD. Long birthtaking, not top pleasure. Salvazar Emrys, now known as Salvatio Malfoy, was standing in front of the front gates of Hogwarts, contemplating his past. It had been years since he had been last seen the castle in front of him, and yet, throughout all his life, all those centuries, millennia he had lived, he had always returned to it. It was his home, and it felt definitely odd that he was now thinking about breaking and entering into it. But needs must, Sal thought darkly, his eyes searching out the one tower that once had belonged to Peveril. Needs must. Nevertheless, it was odd to Sal that after all these years working at Hogwarts, after all these years learning and living at Hogwarts, after all these years defending Hogwarts, he had now come to conquer it. A healer on Warpath, Sal thought amused. That's not what you'll see every day. Then he bared his teeth in a semblance of a smile. But then, he thought, sometimes it needs to be a healer who goes to war. Sometimes only a healer will be the one to do the right thing, not the easy. Regretfully, Sal guessed that such a time had come today. "Hello, Atri," he greeted Hogwarts. "I've come to take your master down." And the old black iron gates slowly opened. Year 1411. "Andromeda, Sherry," Sal said while setting down the cutlery. "I wanted to talk to you, Sherry." Andromeda looked up from her potions book. It wasn't normal in this time that a woman went on and got a mastery, but Sal had insisted when he had found out that his wife, or back then future wife, was interested into potions. When the Potions Master Guild objected to the idea of a woman working, Sal had simply pointed out that he wanted to do a mastery in potions, and that he needed his wife to bounce off ideas. It would be a travesty if a potions master's wife had actually no idea about the field of study of her husband. A lot of wizards had thought the reasoning a little bit odd, but in the end, they had granted Sal his request, and Andromeda was accepted as an apprentice. A year ago she had finished her mastery and was now the first potions mistress in over 3 centuries. Sal, on the other hand, had finished his studies a few years before her and had continued on into the medical field, something that Andromeda had no real interest in but was willing to learn anyway to keep up the pretense that Sal needed her to bounce off ideas. And maybe he truly did need her. Over the last 3 years of their marriage and the 6 years of betrothal, Sal had gained a friend in his wife. She wasn't the love of his life, but she was a friend and someone he could live with for the rest of his life if he had to, not that he would have to. Sal was more than aware that Andromeda would die long before he stopped living, and there was no way to change that. His uncle might have made a philosopher's stone, but the price to make another was too high, and the stone his uncle was using wouldn't sustain his aunt and uncle, and Andromeda, if she would have been willing to use it, which she wasn't. "What do you need, Maios Amicus?" Andromeda asked in that moment, finally finishing the line she had been reading. "I wanted to talk to you, Cherry," Sal said with a sigh before pulling out a letter. "I got this morning, and I wanted your opinion on it." She took the letter from his hand and read it. Then she set it down on her book in front of her. "What do you want to do, Maios Amicus?" she asked him, interested. Sal frowned and stared at the wall behind his wife, thinking about it. "I'd like to return to Hogwarts," he said finally, sincerely, thinking of his son and his grandparents that were still living in Hogwarts right now. "But I won't take the job offer if you don't want to go." Andromeda smiled at him. "I know," she said. "But then, right now, we don't have any children, and with your inability to father some, it will take time until we will have one." Sal winced a little bit at that. He felt a little guilty that he had basically forced Andromeda to give up the hope for her own children way before they were even married. Andromeda told him that she didn't care about that she preferred to study and learn, but he still couldn't stop to at least feel a little bit guilty whenever she spoke about that fact so carelessly. "Maybe I will even able to take over teaching when the current potions master retires. He's quite old, already after all," his wife continued in that moment. Sal smiled at her when he heard that. "If that's what you wish, I will make it happen," he promised her. He had more than enough influence with the Wizards' Council or the school if he wanted it, after all. If Andromeda wished to teach, he would do everything short of taking the crown to make it happen. Of course, Sal would prefer not to have to take such drastic measures for such a simple thing, but he was at least willing to use them, as long as it was something as reasonable as wanting to teach. He would have thought twice if the request had been unreasonable, but teaching in his eyes was reasonable enough. "I know," Andromeda replied, amused. I remember quite well your sudden change in interest after finding out that I wouldn't be able to study potions on my own." Sal just shrugged and grinned at her. "I'm your husband," he said truthfully. "The least I can do is to make sure that this marriage is a happy one." Andromeda smiled at that. "The least I can do is make sure the same," she replied. "You want to go to Hogwarts, I can see it in your eyes, so we will go to Hogwarts. I don't mind, and you don't need to step back from your wishes for me. This marriage is a bond of two people. We both have to at least try to make it work. I don't want to live like some of the others, unhappy and alone. If it means a little cooperation from both of us, so be it. I wanted to be a potions mistress, and you made sure that I could be one. Now you want to go to Hogwarts, so let's do it." Silas smiled at that. As much as he had tried to stop his parents from marrying him off, at least they had managed to find someone he could understand and get along with just fine. It wasn't perfect, but it was life, and Sal didn't mind at all. "So let's go to Hogwarts," he said, amused. "Here comes the new healer for the medical wing." Years later, Sal would look back and shake his head. Back then it had looked like a job for a few years before he returned to traveling or taking on his own clientele. It would take at least a decade until Sal understood that he would be the healer of Hogwarts for at least the next century to come. Year 1427. "She's wonderful," Andromeda cooed, rocking the days-old baby in her arms. "She'll be a devil when she grows up," Anastasius replied, smirking. "Nah," Sal reprimanded, and the vampire ducked his head. "I apologize, Dame Andromeda," he said. "That was most uncalled for. She will be worse than the devil, I assure you." "Anastasius!" Sal stared at his vampire child, basically scolding him with his eyes. Then Sal's mother laughed. "Oh, Salvatio," she exclaimed, giggling. "You should hear yourself. You sound like a papa already." Anastasius flashed his teeth at that. "He's always talking to me like that," he said, fake pouting. "It's as if Pater uses me to train for his baby child." Sal rolled his eyes at his son. "Well, you are always calling him Pater," Andromeda pointed out, amused. "It's no wonder that he treats you like his son if you call him like that." "But I like calling him Pater," the vampire whined. "Then don't object to being treated like my son, Anna," Sal pointed out ruthlessly. "And now out with you. You have some investigating to do." His son pouted. "Researching what is happening all over the Isles can wait for a bit. The naming is more important." "Well, I'm definitely honored that you think the naming of my daughter is more important than unnatural fog and coldness all over the Isles, but don't you think you should have other priorities, Anastasius Sanguini?" Andromeda said with a raised eyebrow. "But my dear stepmama," Anna pouted, "don't you think that Big Brother shouldn't be here to say hello to his new little sister?" "Well, you did that now," Sal intercepted before Andromeda could answer, "and now that you're done with it, I'm sure we can make do without you. Now off you go. Your stepmother and I have to decide on the name of your sister." Sal and Anastasius had never told Sal's parents and Sal's wife their true relationship. They never tried to hide the relationship, they just never outright told it as well. As a result, Anastasius had been somehow indirectly adopted into the family as a semi-child of Sal, most of the family members guessing that Anastasius's pater was based on Sal's fatherly behavior towards the children, while Sal's fatherly behavior towards the vampire was seen as some kind of revenge for being called pater by the vampire. Sal didn't plan on telling his wife of his family anything more about his relationship with Anastasius. They knew the most important parts. They didn't need to know that Sal raised the vampire as well. Anastasius was part of the family, and it didn't truly matter if he was seen as a semi-grandson or as an actual one. At least it didn't to the vampire and his father. "But I want to stay and help naming her," the vampire whined in that moment. "It's my little sister we're talking about here. I can't leave you and come back just to find out you named her Ursula or something like that." "What's wrong with the name Ursula?" Andromeda asked, confused. "Nothing," Anastasius complained. "The only thing wrong with it would be that I had no hand in choosing it." Sal rolled his eyes. "You're far too old to act like a child," he reprimanded his son. Anastasius stuck out his tongue in reply, and Andromeda laughed. "Let him stay, Mias Amix," she said, amused. "I don't mind. Maybe he has a good idea or two how to name her." I do, Anastasius exclaimed. How about naming her traditionally? I'd offer to be the godparent. Sal groaned. His parents laughed and Andromeda looked at her daughter thoughtfully. Why not? She finally said. It's a dying tradition, but I think it's perfect. Great, Anastasius exclaimed happily. Sal just sighed. Wonderful, he said while rubbing his nose bridge. Now I have to choose a name by myself. Andromeda just smiled. I name her Perdita, she said. Sal took a deep breath, then he closed his eyes and chose the one name he had thought about, since he had heard that his uncle Nicholas had found them a baby girl. Perdita Helena, he said. Anastasius grinned. Perdita Helena Nymphadora, he said, and Sal wanted to groan at the name his son had chosen for his sister and goddaughter. Sal was sure that his daughter wouldn't appreciate to be named Nymphadora. At least it's just the third name, he consoled himself. Hundreds of years later, long after little Perdita's father had lost track of her squib descendants in the Muggle world, another little girl would be born to her pure-blood mother and Muggle-born, well, squib-born father. Sadly enough, she wouldn't be as lucky as little Perdita. We're year 1440. But father, Anna said I could. I don't care what Anna said, Sal objected instantly. I as your father say you're not allowed, and that's my final word on this matter. But father, please, some of the others are going as well and… No, Perdita, I won't allow it, especially considering that you plan to leave Hogwarts as well too, minus. The others are going too, nobody has objected. I'm quite sure that others have. You might not have heard it, but considering the danger out there, it's not that dangerous to… It is, Sal objected heatedly. But even if it wasn't, leaving Hogwarts is currently nearly as dangerous as your insane plan. You're talking as if Hogwarts is the only safe place in the whole world, father. Not in the whole world, but with the attacks, leaving people in a kind of coma, that unnatural fog all over Britain, the coldness. But I won't go alone, his daughter objected. I'll be You won't go at all, Sal corrected her coolly. Like I said, even without the trouble all over the Isles, I would never allow you to go out to follow this insane plan. But… No, Sal said severely. No 13-year-old daughter of mine will go out dragon hunting. Do you understand, Donzelle Malfoy? His daughter pouted. I do, she said unhappily. And now return to your dorm and send your history professor to me, Sal added darkly. I will have words with him for allowing you to go dragon hunting. But Anna's… Thankfully, just your godparent, Sal intercepted, and now off you go. His daughter pouted again, but in the end complied. The moment she was gone, the potions professor of Hogwarts, otherwise known as Sal's wife, started to laugh. Sal just frowned. I truly don't understand, he said sighing. I'm a Ravenclaw. You're a Slytherin. How by wind and fire did we manage to rise a Gryffindor? Andromeda just kept laughing. I still blame Anastasius, she gasped between laughter. I'm quite sure he bit her somewhere in the past and made her a Gryffindor. Sal rolled his eyes. Anna might be able to make a child by biting a witch or wizard if he wanted to, but there's no way he'd be able to make them a Gryffindor by biting them, he said amused. You sure me is a mix, Andromeda said, still giggling. I think he managed quite well, or how else do you explain a Ravenclaw and a Slytherin producing a Gryffindor? Sal thought it over. I guess you're right, he finally said amused. Seems like I have to defang him for that. The answer was a yelp from the door. Obviously Sal's wayward son had heard Sal's last sentence. It was a joke, Pater, Anastasius exclaimed, backing away from his father. Just a joke. I never meant her to take it seriously when I told her we could go and hunt a dragon. You wouldn't defang me for a joke, would you? Sal just raised an unimpressed eyebrow. Anastasius gulped. I go and talk to her? He offered, stuttering. Sal's mien didn't change. Anastasius gulped again. And I help you in the medical wing for a week. At Sal's expressionless face he amended his statement. A month. That's all right, Andromeda said, nearly choking on her laughter. But don't you dare to do it again. I won't, Anastasius promised, and when his father sighed he fled. Sal raised an eyebrow at his son's tactical retreat. At least you have one of them under control, Andromeda said amused. even if it's technically the wrong one." Then she dissolved into laughter again. Sal this time raised an eyebrow at her. Who said it was the wrong one? He wanted to know. With Anastasius trying to make things right again, he will end up stopping Perdita a lot more thoroughly than I ever could in the end. Too true, Andromeda snorted. Truly too true, mes amici. Then Sal couldn't help it anymore and started to laugh as well. Year 1449-49-9? There was an attack on some travelers at the borders. They've fallen into a coma and won't wake anymore. Healers say that it looks as if they lost their souls somehow, and the only thing left is their body. Anastasius exclaimed angrily. I went there and I found the perpetrators, but whatever those things are, I can't fight them. Sal frowned at his son. Things, he repeated darkly. Anastasius nodded. Things, he confirmed. I saw them, and they are horrible. I remembered my mother and first father dying and everything else that went horrible wrong in my life. Sal's eyes darkened when he heard that. Dementors, he said, and his son looked at him confused. You know what those things are? He asked, surprised. Sal nodded and put away the last of the potions he had been stocking his infirmary with. I know what they are, he said darkly. They are creatures you don't want to meet and don't want to cross. They're dangerous then? Anastasius asked, concerned. Very, Sal answered darkly. They belong to the immortal Firbolg. Anastasius' eyes widened at that. But, if they are, shouldn't they? They are born to spread fear, Sal said, sighing. They might be there to balance our world, but they are fearsome creatures as well, and they have long since gone further than what they should do. The entire race has fallen sometime in the past. Anastasius frowned. Fallen? He asked, confused, and Sal sighed. The lot of the immortal Firbolg is a hard one, he said. Some of them loose themselves to the monsters within them, some of them turn into monsters when they lose their sanity, and some burn to ashes and leave the world bereaved of themselves and their light. Not one of them will ever have a peaceful death. They lost their sanity, Anastasius concluded darkly. They lost their sanity, Sal affirmed, sighing. And now they're here on the Isles, Anastasius said. Sal's eyes darkened at that. How many? He asked. Anastasius shrugged. About 20 or 30, he said. I couldn't come too close. They noticed me before I could, and I had to flee. Sal looked Anastasius over. You weren't hurt, were you? He asked, concerned. Anastasius shook his head. I wasn't, Pater, he said. But they're gaining ground. Soon they will have terrorized half of the Isles. Sal's eyes darkened further. Not for long, he promised. I will go and talk them out of it. Anastasius raised a surprised eyebrow at his father, and Sal smiled darkly. I know how to get rid of them, he said. I might not know how to deal with them in a way that they die, but I know how to force them to flee. Pater, I'll be back in a week's time, Sal said, while patting his son's shoulder. Don't worry about me. I know how to deal with them. If you want to, I will teach you when I return. With that, Sal left the castle. He found the Dementors easily enough. Surprisingly, they weren't alone. They were in the company of a young boy. Sal easily guessed that the boy was a creature born, half Dementor, half something else. The boy grinned at him when he saw him. Oh, the boy exclaimed, there's another one. The boy had dark hair and his eyes sparkled in a way that looked like the boy was a little bit insane as well. Sal wasn't too sure if the boy wasn't insane. How about another breakfast, my dears? The boy asked and giggled. The grin he sent Sal after he had said that was pure evil. I'm sure your eyes would look good in my collection, the boy giggled. Sal's eyes narrowed. Either truly insane, he thought darkly, or evil. I'm still going with inherited insanity. Before he could think further about it, 3 of the Dementors came at him. Sal sighed. There weren't that many Dementors, a lot less than he had encountered back then when he had tried to rescue his godfather in his 3rd year. Or was it in the future when he would rescue his godfather? Sal ignored the thought and instead drew one of his wands. He wasn't yet ready to just throw them out by force, but he also knew that the Dementors were nobody he could reason with. They had long since lost any way to reason with them, and Sal couldn't afford to look weak in front of them. He bared his teeth in a semblance of a smile. I fear I'm not a very good breakfast, he said. I am actually here to ask you to find your breakfast elsewhere, and not on the Isles. This was his last warning, a warning he had issued because of the boy and not because of the Dementors. The boy just laughed at that. "Oh, you're funny," he exclaimed. "Too bad that you'll end up as their breakfast today." Sal rolled his eyes, then he ducked out of the way of the first Dementor. "Expecto Patronum," he cried. Sal didn't know what he expected, but he definitely didn't expect the golden phoenix that came out of his wand instead of his old stag patronus. The phoenix cried, sending a thrilling song throughout the woods around him. The Dementors staggered, then the first was touched by the patronus, and suddenly it cried out, fleeing from the light creature, clearly terrified of it. The boy's eyes widened when he saw his companions fleeing from the golden construct of the phoenix. Sal was a little bit surprised that his phoenix actually tattered the Dementor's clothes. This was not usual for a patronus, from what Sal knew of the spell. He wondered what had changed that had changed his patronus, not only into a phoenix but into something that actually hurt a Dementor. The boy's eyes, meanwhile, still followed Sal's patronus. Then his eyes met Sal's. Sal stared at the boy evenly. "I don't condone any creatures hurting others," he said icily. "Stealing their souls is hurting them, and I won't let you continue doing that." The boy laughed harshly. "As if a few stupid mortals like them matter," he hissed. "They're all guilty in some way or form. I don't think that anybody will miss them." Then he giggled. "And if they weren't guilty," the boy shrugged, "then I made sure that they won't turn guilty in the future. Doesn't matter. They're not important at all." Sal's eyes narrowed. "You have no right to decide anything like that," he pointed out coolly. "Killing them without a reason is nothing you should do. And don't try to tell me that the Dementors need their souls to survive. You and I know that they don't." The boy grinned and shrugged at that. "Nah," he said, "they don't." Then he waved it off. "But it doesn't actually matter to me," he said. "It's not as if I actually need a reason for killing them. I like to hear them scream. That's enough for me." Sal's eyes narrowed. "Leave these lands," he said icily. "Murderers aren't welcome here." The boy laughed harshly. "As if I care," he snickered and then pointed at Sol. "Kill him," he told the Dementors. Sal just redirected his Patronus back into the fray of Dementors, forcing them to flee. Then one of the Dementors was hit by his Patronus head-on and with a screech combusted into a shower of golden light. Sal and the boy stared at the place where the combusted Dementor had been. Then the boy's eyes narrowed, staring icily at Sol. "You will regret that," he threatened. "I will take you down. This island will tremble beneath my feet." And with that the boy grabbed one of the Dementors, and the Dementors together with the boy fled the Isles. Sal sighed unhappily, before staring at the place the combusted Dementor had been in confusion. What by wind and fire actually happened there, he wondered, before shaking his head and returning to Hogwarts. He guessed that he would have to do some research. Dementors normally didn't combust when hit by a Patronus, but then the Patronus wasn't a charm that was actually known in that time, so who knew if they had built up a resistance to Patronus charms over the time. Sal guessed that he would find out sometimes in the future. Year 1460. "Father, I need you," his daughter cried. She was carrying her toddler daughter and was pregnant with another child. It had taken some time until she had been able to conceive, not unusual with witches and wizards, but now she was the mother of a smiling baby girl with black locks and grey eyes. Sal finished the bandage he had been applying to one of the students and then turned to his daughter. "What happened?" he asked, concerned. His daughter was pale, and fear was clearly visible in her eyes. "She fell into the lake," she sobbed, handing him her daughter. "I did as you taught me and she's breathing again, but—" "Calm down," he instructed her. "Sit down on the bed over there and I take a look at Amelia. It will be a lot easier if I don't have to worry about you going prematurely in labor while I tend to my first grandchild." His daughter nodded and sat down while trying to calm her breathing. Sal meanwhile took a look at his grandchild. The girl was breathing but unconsciousness. With a few runes drawn onto the floor, he constructed a colorful magical dome above the child, his own version of a diagnostic charm. "Don't worry," he said in the end, after interpreting the charm. She's a little bit hypothermic, but it's going to be all right. I keep her here for the night, and tomorrow she should be right as rain. Sadly, even with his diagnosis, the shock pulled his own daughter over the edge. Sal's second grandchild, a little boy called Leontes, would be born 3 weeks early in the early morning of the next day. Sal was very happy that he had been a healer for such a long time. He wasn't sure if the boy would have survived otherwise. Year 1473, Pater Anastasius said, entering the medical wing in hurried strides. "They're back." Sal looked up from the knee of the boy he had been bandaging. "Who's back?" he asked, a little bit preoccupied. "The Dementors," Anastasius replied darkly. "Their death case is near Londinium." Sal's eyes darkened with fury. "I go and take care of them," he said icily. "Tell the headmaster I'm out if you please." Anastasius sighed but nodded. "I will, Pater," he said concerned. "Will you allow me to come with you?" Sal looked his son over for a moment, then he sighed. "You know the charm and can perform it?" he asked. "I do and I can," Anastasius replied. Sal nodded. "Then tell the headmaster, and I tell my wife, and we will meet at the entrance to Hogwarts in half an hour." "Of course, Pater," and with that his son was gone. Sal, on the other hand, went to the dungeons and the potions classroom in search of his wife. "Andromeda," Sal said darkly the moment he found her. "I have to go away for a bit, Cherry, I'm sorry." His wife frowned at him at that. "Away?" she asked, concerned. "Where to?" "To the border of the Isles," Sal replied, his face concealing his fury. "There's something I need to take care of." "What do you need to take care of out there?" Andromeda asked, confused. Sal just forced himself to smile at her. "Nothing too concerning," he said. "I promise." She frowned, but let him go anyway. The second confrontation with the Dementors didn't truly end, different than the first. The only difference was that Anastasius Patronus was helping Sal's. Anastasius Patronus was a white construct, exactly like Sal's stag had been, and it didn't kill Dementors. "Something," Sal said confused after they had forced the Dementors away from the Isles, "is wrong with my Patronus." Anastasius just raised an eyebrow. "I thought it was the other way round," he said. "After all, your Patronus at least kills those things. It's a lot more effective that way." "But it shouldn't function that way," Sal said, sighing, "and I have no idea why it does." "Have you researched it?" Sal shrugged, sighing. "Everywhere I could," he said, amused. "Everywhere I could." Anastasius snorted. "Figures," he said, amused. "My father develops a charm and manages to be the sole exception to it as well." Sal rolled his eyes but didn't correct his son's assumption that he had developed the spell. He had researched it, and it didn't exist yet. Since he had basically brought it to life, he had basically constructed it, even if he actually hadn't. Time travel is definitely confusing sometimes, he thought with a headshake. Then he decided to forget it and continue on like he always had. He had long since given up on trying to figure out what had come into existence because of him and what would have existed anyway. His life was far too interwoven with time to keep those two parts apart. Year 1488. "Father," Sal looked up from his work at the voice of his daughter. "Perdita," he said, frowning. "Why are you here? Shouldn't you be in France with your husband and children?" The answer was a lot of tears. "I was," she cried, throwing herself at him as if she was still a little girl. "Sebastian and I were home and," she shuddered, "the neighbors accused us of being witches." Again, tears started to leak and Sal froze after hearing those words. After the Malleus Maleficarum, the hammer against the witches, had been published the year before, all over Europe witch trials had started to be held. Sal could only think with dread about the fact that he knew from his lessons far in the future. The trials just now were just the beginning. He shuddered at the thought. Then his mind turned to his daughter's missing family. "What happened to your husband and children?" he asked with dread. "Emilia and her husband are all right," his daughter replied. Emilia was Sal's oldest grandchild. She was already married herself, even if she didn't have any children right now, but she wasn't his only grandchild. "And the rest of the children? And your husband?" he asked, dreading the answer. The only answer were tears. Sal closed his eyes and pulled his daughter closer while wishing desperately that there would be a way to change time. Regretfully, he knew that if they hadn't survived, nothing he did in the past would change that. Sometimes Sal hated his life. Year 1493, Andromeda, Cherry, Sal said, sighing. Please, think about it again. The answer was a cool stare, and in the end Sal just sighed and gave in. Being married to her for over a century has taught him when to object and when to give in. Still, you know that we're both not the youngest anymore, he told her. The answer was another cool stare. Even if I would be 200 years old, Mia's Amix, she said coolly, I wouldn't miss this. Sal sighed and closed his eyes. As you wish, Dunzel, he finally replied. She looked at him distrustfully as if she wasn't sure that he meant it, but in the end she nodded, satisfied with what she had been reading in his face. Don't forget to pack some warm clothes, she said. Sal rolled his eyes in amusement, but inclined his head anyway. Of course, Cherry, he said. Don't forget to write your uncle, Andromeda added. He will want to know that we leave to Nuremberg for a few months. Of course, Cherry, Sal said. He still couldn't believe that Andromeda wanted to travel across the country at her age. You know that they would come by before long, don't you, Cherry? She threw him another exasperated look. Your granddaughter is having her first child, and you want to wait until she comes by after birth, Mius Amix? Andromeda looked at him icily. Well, Sol said hesitatingly, her husband is with her as well as our daughter. I should think that that's enough, isn't it? Andromeda snorted. This is our first great-grandchild, she replied. We won't miss the birth, even if we have to go to Nuremberg for it. Yes, Cherry, Sal said amused. I got it. We won't miss the birth of our fifth great-grandchild. She looked at him, then huffed and turned back to packing. Sal shook his head in amusement, but started to pack as well. It seemed that his wife was determined to be there for the birth itself, even if it was still months away. Over the last century, Sal had gotten used to a family life. He was fond of his own wife, and had been ecstatic when Nicholas had found a little orphan girl when Sal had officially been 42. Of course, a lot of people had talked about Sal and Andromeda's missing children. There had been rumors that Andromeda was barren. Of course, those rumors had stopped when Nicholas and Sal finally had found an orphan baby girl. Sal and Andromeda had taken in the child, adopted her with the same potion that had been used on Sal, and then told everyone that she was their daughter by flesh. Thanks to a little deception, nobody doubted the claim. Sal's daughter had even managed to have a child herself before Sal's father had died, so that he and Sal's mother had been able to welcome their first and now only great-grandchild. Sal's father had died a year after the little girl's birth, and his mother had followed 2 years later. Sal, at that time, had long since been the Lord of Malfoy. Of course he had mourned his parents, but he had been quite occupied with his little granddaughter, his daughter, the students, and his wife, so in the end he grieved but moved on. Sal was quite sure that it would be different when Andromeda would finally die. She was more than 5 years over the century's mark as well, and Sal feared that Andromeda's time on Earth soon would be up. Andromeda, on the other hand, didn't see it like that at all. She was still quite lively for her age, and she had promised Sol repeatedly that she would last at least another 10 years or more. I'm a black, she said amused every time he voiced his fears. If your parents managed to live for 100 years, then a black like me, one of those who have a naturally long lifespan, should at least last 10 years more than them. I'm trying for 20. Sal couldn't even object to her goal, because losing the woman who had turned into his best friend was something he feared quite a lot. Have you packed everything and written your uncle, Miuzamikis? Andromeda asked in that moment. Sal looked up from where he was packing the last things Andromeda wanted to take with them. I have, Cherry, he said. We're good to go. Good, she nodded. I still think that we should at least travel by apparition for part of the way, Sal dared to add. The answer was another cool stare. We're not using that new death trap of magic, Andromeda said. Sal sighed. Apparition isn't a death trap, he said, half amused, half exasperated. Andromeda just raised an eyebrow. Haven't you listened when they talked about the accidents that happened thanks to that death trap? She asked him stubbornly. No, We're using the normal method, brooms and carriages, not that idiotic way of suicide the young generation thinks it has to use. We're not 30 anymore, Mu Amix. But it would be way faster, Sal objected. And it's not truly new anyway. Thousands of people have apparated long before they found out how to do it deliberately, and even more have hurt themselves badly while doing so, Andromeda countered. Sal had to admit that she had a point. Unlike others, I would be able to heal it, he argued. Of course you would be, Andromeda said, not even thinking about objecting him. Sal was well known as the current healer of Hogwarts, after all, and as one of the best healers of the known world. But it's still a death trap, Andromeda added in that moment. It's an absolute idiotic way to move from one place to another. I'm quite sure that others will soon agree, and that whole imbecility will be forgotten over long. Until then, we will continue to use the proper method of traveling. Do you understand, Muir Amix? Of course, Cherry, Sal replied, still half amused, half exasperated. As you wish, Dumbledore. He didn't believe that wizards would stop to use apparition in the future, but he had long since accepted that Andromeda had her own views, and some of them couldn't be changed. Part of that was her distaste for apparition, which had started to truly exist just 30 years ago. Truly, Sal's wife said in that moment while shaking her head. What people come up with to fasten up traveling. The next thing they'll tell me is that you're going to travel through fire. For a moment, Sal was tempted to agree with her, vividly remembering his second year at Hogwarts in the future and his trip through the Floo. Then he decided not to tempt fate and closed his mouth again. He didn't want to get into another discussion, especially since he would have to tell her about his time traveling to be able to explain his knowledge, and he had never dared to tell her about that tidbit ever before. Andromeda, still deep in thought, shook her head again and then sighed. Do we have everything, Mu Amix? She asked him finally. We do, Cherry, he replied, and she nodded. Then let's go, and with that they left to their journey to Nuremberg. Of course, when they finally arrived, they were at least a month too early. Honestly, Mother, Perdita said amused, we would have come by with the little one as soon as we could. You didn't have to travel through half of Europe to get here. You and I know that your father is the best healer out there, Andromeda replied at that to her daughter. Of course we came. Her daughter sighed, but smiled. I'm happy you're here, Mother, she said. I truly am. I just meant that you didn't have to go through all that trouble. It's our first great-grandchild, of course we would go through all that trouble. Andromeda replied amused, and now be a dear and tell Amelia we're here. Yes, Mother, Perdita replied. That evening Sal left his daughter, wife and granddaughter alone to catch up. His granddaughter's husband was away on a political dinner his wife couldn't attend, thanks to her pregnancy, and Sal had no intention to be anywhere near the house when his girls decided to have a girls' night. So he had decided to wander the streets of Nuremberg. It was late autumn, and while Sal walked the streets, the first snow of the year started to fall. Sal sighed and looked up to the sky. He guessed that they would have Yule in Nuremberg this year. Entschuldigung, a voice suddenly spoke up from behind. Sal turned and looked at the man who had stepped out of the entrance to an inn. How can I help you, Hera? Sal asked in the German of the 1400s, a little bit confused that the man would take the time to talk to a stranger on the street. It wasn't something people often did in this time and age. You have the markings of a healer, Meister Hera, the stranger replied, and Sal's eyes narrowed. I'm not sure what you're talking about, he said slowly. Even if the witch trials weren't yet at its peak, it still was good to be cautious. The other man hesitated, then he sighed and rubbed his forehead. Please, Meister Hera, he begged, if you truly are what I think you are, don't deny it. I could use the help of someone like you. What do you mean with someone like me, Heather? Sal asked, his eyes narrowing further. A creature not born like you, Meister Hera, the man replied, and Sal's eyebrow rose. How did you come up with the theory that I'm a creature born? He asked, interested. The man sighed. I can smell it, he answered, and when Sal's eyes narrowed again, he raised his hands to calm him. I'm an elder dragon, he blurted out. I can smell the dragon in your blood. It's diluted, meaning you have to be a creature nuckish born, but it's still there and it's strong. Sal looked at the man in surprise. I thought the elder dragons are gone, Herr, he said, unable to censure his words in his surprise. The other man winced. We are, he said. The most of us have long since lost their sanity. Beasts we are now, normal dragons, not better than any other beast in this world. He shook his head. I'm the last one, or at least one of the last, he said tiredly. I don't know how long I will continue to exist in this world like that. Even now I feel my sanity slipping. There's nothing I can do to help with that, Herr, Sal replied sadly. I know, the elder dragon replied, his face a painful grin, but I didn't stop you to ask for your help with that, Meister Herr. You asked for a healer, Sal pointed out. But not for that, the elder dragon replied. I asked for you to stop, because I can feel the Pendragon in your blood, Meister Herr. Sal's eyes narrowed again. I'm not sure what you mean, he said slowly. The elder dragon blinked as if he hadn't even suspected a reply like that. The Pendragon, he repeated, and when Sal's face didn't change, he sighed. Your father should have told you something important like that, he mumbled, while shaking his head in despair. Whatever elder dragon your father was, he was an idiot for not telling you about your inheritance, Meister Herr. Sal blinked. Elder dragon? Father? It was then that he put two and two together, and for a moment he wanted to groan. The elder dragon thought that Sal was the son of another elder dragon. For a moment Sal was tempted to correct the other man, then he sighed and decided to let it be for now. He would ask the important things first, and then the rest. His own heritage could wait. It would be far too complicated to explain it in a few sentences anyway. What exactly is a Pendragon for an elder dragon, Herr? He asked instead. The other man seemed to have resigned himself to the role of a teacher already, because he started to explain without further ado. It implies the age of an elder dragon, Meister Herr, he explained patiently. It means you are at least 1,000 years old. Your blood is basically leaking your age. The older an elder dragon is, the less others want to disobey them. The older we get, the more dangerous we are, after all. When Sal raised an eyebrow, the other man just shrugged. It's mostly knowledge that makes us more dangerous compared to younger elder dragons, Meister Herr, he said. Knowledge and the fact that we're basically interwoven with the land itself. There's a reason why every magical royal family in the world has elder dragon blood in their veins. The longer an elder dragon lives in a country, the more he is interwoven with its magic, and the more he will try to protect it. And you, wherever you are from, are a Pendragon who's quite tightly interwoven with his country. Sal frowned a little, but unsure what the elder dragon was trying to explain to him exactly. Interwoven how? He finally asked. The elder dragon shrugged. Mostly with the land, he said. The more often an elder dragon uses magic on one particular space of land, or the stronger magic he uses there, the better he can use magic there later on. His magic basically connected with the land beneath his feet, and as long as he uses magic that is connected to the ground in that particular place, he won't have trouble with spells he would have trouble with everywhere else. I'm still not sure I understand, Herr, Sal confessed. It was a surprising experience for him. He hadn't felt that undereducated for a long, long time now. It's simple, the elder dragon shrugged. If you put up a ward here on this street, or if you use any kind of other magic, then your magic connects with the land beneath your feet. The next time you're here in this particular street, and you try to put up a ward, you might even be able to put up 2 or 3 or 4 or whatever. The more magic or the stronger the magic you used here before was, the better you can use the land in your casting. It's called interweaving spells. Basically, you put up the ward once, and with the help of your connection with the land, you simply copy it instead of putting it up a second time next to the first. It's something an elder dragon does naturally. It's also the reason why you're stronger in some places than in others. Sal's eyes widened at that. He remembered the great battle of the North Fields, in about the same place he had landed when he had met Merlin, and he remembered his troubles in the village with Godric. Interweaving spells, he repeated, surprised. Who would have thought that it would take that long to find out the reason for all those inconsistencies? The elder dragon snorted. Of course, he added to Sal's musing, if you're a royal, the whole thing is nearly moot. The moment you take up the crown, you are connected to the country as a whole, meaning that even with your meager powers, you could beat the snot out of everyone who dared to enter your country. Sal just raised an eyebrow. You can't take the crown without the approval of the people, he pointed out. The king's power is based on the belief of the people. If they don't believe and respect him, then his power is nearly non-existent. If they do, then others shouldn't even dare to think about crossing them. The elder dragon waved it off. It's a moot point for both of us, he said. Royals are always descendants of creature nash-born. You and I both are creature nash-born. There's no way we could be royal, even with you being a pendragon. Sal's eyes narrowed again when he finally came to the second point he had wanted to have clarified before. But how do you know that I'm a creature born? He asked with narrowed eyes. I could be an older one for all you know. The elder dragon just smiled at him. Your blood screams of fire, he said. I can feel it coursing through your veins. There's death around you, clouding and shielding you, and I can feel the beast inside you rearing its head. It might have been hundreds of years since I felt it last, but I remember the feeling of an elder dragon quite well. Meister Hera. I could still be... The other man just shook his head. For all an older one has inherited part of our power, they have lost a lot of it as well, he said. They might be able to throw fire if they are the descendant of an elder dragon, but the ember in their veins is nearly extinguished. The further you are away from the sire of your line, the more the fire blasting through your veins turns to embers. The ember might always be there, always be able to set a flame if they need it, but it's still not the same. Sal's eyebrows furrowed. He knew quite well that he was only a descendant of an elder dragon. He wasn't a creature born, if you didn't count him as a second-generation one, since Merlin had been a creature born, and Sal's other birth parents had been oldie ones. Fire in my veins? He repeated, still a little bit confused. The elder dragon nodded. Blasting, wild, destructive, he replied. So unlike the soothing flames of a phoenix, you should know that it's there, you should be feeling it. Sal frowned. Then he remembered the white flames that had enveloped him when he had tried to kill himself. Blasting, wild, destructive, a fitting description for them. But they were the flames of a phoenix, weren't they? On the other hand, Sal had learned to use flames with his hands, but only with his hands. He had no control over them otherwise. The only exception had been the day he had tried to kill himself, and back then he hadn't controlled the flames. Back then they had controlled him. They had been phoenix fire, purifying, but destructive, uncontrolled, wild, white and cold and death-bringing, blasting and dangerous, not only for him, phoenix or elder dragon, and who could tell the difference when they were both part of his blood? Then the elder dragon laughed. You don't have to think up an argument to deny it, he said. I can feel the fire in your veins and the serpent-like beast in your mind. You might suppress them both, but they are still there, as much as you deny it. Your connection to the land, your status as a pendragon, just tells me that both of it is the sign that you are an elder dragon's creature nash-born, and not the son of a phoenix and a basilisk, mixed with something else or something like that. Sal's eyes narrowed. Why a basilisk, he asked. Why not any other magical serpent-like beast? The elder dragon shrugged. There aren't that many who can sire children with other species, he said, and the basilisk is the only one of them who bears the same curse as the elder dragon. They will lose their mind someday, like we will lose ours, but unlike us, they can and will turn against their own children and grandchildren as well when it happens. If their child or grandchild is near them, they will kill it. It's in the nature of their beast. I can't remember a case when the child survived its parents' or grandparents' bite if it was bitten. I don't think the world wants to know the result of a child surviving its sire's bite. Sal's inner eye replayed a memory of his second year in Hogwarts. A sword stabbing the head of a basilisk and a fang embedding itself into a young boy's arm. This wasn't my grandmother, he tried to tell himself, feeling suddenly quite sick to his stomach. And even if it was, she wasn't my grandmother back then. He definitely hadn't survived his grandmother's bite. Sal shook off the thought. He never tried to think about the future if he didn't have to. It wasn't worth contemplating if the basilisk he had killed was his grandmother or not. He couldn't change it now, and he doubted that he would be able to change it in the future as well. He turned away from the thought back to the elder dragon in front of him. Even if you're right with all that, he said, that doesn't explain why you stopped me. The elder dragon smiled tiredly. You're a pendragon, he said. You're a healer, aren't you, Meister Her? I can feel your healer's oath even if it isn't activated right now, meaning that you have been a healer for a very long time. Long enough that every sworn potions master or healer would automatically defer to you if he had to work together with you. Sala frowned a bit at that. It was a well-kept secret that in times when healers had to work together, one of them, the most experienced one, would automatically proclaim to be the lead healer. It was magic that was part of the healer's oath that determined the rank of a healer when working with others. Thanks to Sal's age and experience, even before he had even sworn the oath, he had nearly always been in the position of the lead healer. That the elder dragon knew just meant that he had at least done a mastery in potions if he wasn't a healer himself. "You're a potions master, Hedda?" Sal guessed and the elder dragon nodded. "I've been one for about 500 years, he confirmed, and Sal frowned. "If you are that old, why do you approach me, Heather?" he asked, confused. "You might just be a potions master, but I doubt that you didn't learn enough of the healing arts over all those hundreds of years to treat what ails you." The answer was a sigh. "Nothing is ailing me," the elder dragon said. "It's more that after the Romans conquered nearly all of Europe, a lot of ancient Germanic knowledge has been lost. I know that what I'm looking for existed once, but I can't find any sources about it now. You are a healer, and you have been a healer longer than I have been a potions master. You hope I know what you're looking for," Sal concluded, surprised. The elder dragon nodded, and Sol sighed. "All right," he said. "Let's talk somewhere else, somewhere warm preferably, and I will see what I can do." The elder dragon smiled. "Thank you, Meister Hera," he said. "I am Wilhelm Bombastus von Hohenheim." Sal's eyes narrowed at that. "This is not your original name," he accused. He knew that back then the magicals all over Europe had still used 3 first names, and creature-borns mostly followed that custom still. The elder dragon smiled. "No," he said. "It's the name I have currently taken as my own." Sal inclined his head. "Salvatio, Amethyst Malfoy," he said. "The same circumstances as you." The elder dragon laughed. Then he gestured for Sal to follow him. He led them to a house at the outer circles of Nuremberg, near the wall. "This is where my wife and I live," he said before opening the door and leading Sal deeper into the house. The living room was occupied by a woman with sharp features and fangs. "Vampire," Sal immediately recognized. "My wife Serafina," Wilhelm said. Sal inclined his head. "Frau," he greeted her, and she smiled before looking at her husband inquiringly. "He's a healer," Wilhelm replied, "and he's my elder." Her eyes widened at that, then something akin to hope started to show in them. Sal instead turned to the elder dragon. "Now," he said after Wilhelm had invited him to sit down and Serafina had brought some wine, "can you please explain to me why you need my help?" The couple exchanged a look. "We can't have children," Wilhelm finally said, sighing. "It might not be often that it happens with creatures as us, but it happens." Sal inclined his head. Creatures had a lower birth rate than wizards or muggles, but the chances of one of them being unable to have children was lower as well. Mostly it would just take a lot of time until they conceived, but that didn't mean that they were unable to. Regretfully, even with creatures it could happen, and he guessed that the couple had used the spell and potion that could confirm things like that already. Both spell and potion weren't infallible, but together you could mostly trust them. Sal was just glad that both spell and potion would only start to be semi-reliable after the magic of the children had matured fully and if they were taken with the full conscience, meaning that by then the children normally were already married and considered adults. Otherwise he wasn't sure if some parents wouldn't have disowned their child when they found out. "We found a baby boy," the vampire woman added. "We want to make him our own." Sal's eyebrows furrowed. "The potion gives him access to our family magic." Wilhelm interrupted him. "But we are both creatures. He wouldn't be our own with the potion, because if he was, he would have part of our soul." "Of course," Sal thought while shaking his head inwardly. "A firbolg gives part of their soul to create a child. A normal adoption potion would not give him access to his parents' creature inheritance. He would be able to use a gift or two, but he wouldn't be considered their full child in the eyes of the other firbolg. We heard that there once was a ritual that made sure that even people like us could adopt a child fully," Wilhelm said. The rumor said that he would be reborn as my son if we used that ritual, and we want it. If there's a way. How old is he? Sal interrupted the elder dragon. The couple exchanged a glance. A few weeks, Wilhelm replied finally. We found him abandoned in the woods just shortly after his birth. At least that's what we guess. We don't even know if he has magic or not currently. Sal nodded. He knew that with the adoption it didn't truly matter. He would inherit the magic of his parents. The Firbolg soul parts he would gain would ensure it. This won't be easy, he warned them, remembering the ritual that had given him a father all those years ago. But he's young. He shouldn't have any problems to accept your soul parts as his own. His soul is not yet formed enough that it can't accept another soul part as its own. Wilhelm and Serafina exchanged a surprised and even more hopeful look. You know the ritual we were talking about, Wilhelm said, amazed. You know how to do it. Sal inclined his head. I was trained as a druid, he said. I also was part of it once before. The couple smiled. Will you do it, Meister Hera? Wilhelm finally asked. I promise you that we will make it worth your time. Just tell us what you want, and we will try to give it to you. Sal sighed and shook his head. I don't require anything, he said truthfully. I am a healer. It is my calling to help those people who need me, and while I never object to an offering since I have to live as well, I won't ask for anything. The couple exchanged another look, then Wilhelm nodded. We will pay you anyway, he declared. Now tell us what you need. It was 3 weeks and a half later when Sal and Wilhelm and Serafina met again. They had found an old stone circle not far from Nuremberg, and Sal had cleaned the circle thoroughly for the ritual. The ritual was planned for nightfall, something that was required for this ritual, and slowly darkness ascended the sky. It would be a long day today, the ritual would take some time, and the return to the city would take a lot of time afterwards as well. Sal couldn't believe that the ritual he was now doing, hidden away in the woods, had been once done openly on the hills. The whole thing was odd to him. It had been centuries since he had last used a ritual circle, and even longer since he had done this particular ritual. It was like a look into a long-forgotten memory, and it hurt, considering that the people in that memory were long since dead and gone. When the couple and their little future son arrived, Sal was just finishing the runes and circles he had been drawing into the earth. Pull of your and your son's clothes and put them down somewhere outside the circle, he said. No clothes within the circle. The couple nodded and did what he told them while he drew the last of the runes into the earth. When they were finished, they stopped right outside the circle, looking a little bit nervously at it. Sal's lips twitched in amusement when he remembered that he hadn't been different when he had been part of the ritual all those years ago. Don't step on the drawn runes, he told the couple before gesturing for them to enter the stone circle and walk into its mid, where a stone bed was waiting for their son. Put him down in there, he said. Then Serafina will kneel behind his head and Wilhelm will kneel at his feet. The couple did as they were told, and Sal pulled out a knife. I will have to slit one of your wrists each, he told the couple, and use your blood to draw runes on your son. Then he frowned. I did tell you to bring a third person for the godfather part, didn't I? He confirmed, a bit confused. You did, Wilhelm said, but we decided that the least we can do is to give you the place as his godfather. You are the one who's giving us our son after all. Sal frowned at that. The responsibilities and rights of a godfather were nearly as important as the ones of a parent. His last godchildren had been Heleli, Nicholas and Antioch, the founder's children. It hurt to think about them, and yet he would be exposed to that hurt yet again. He couldn't reject the offer of Wilhelm and Serafina, even if he knew that it would hurt in the end when their son would die sometime in the future. Thank you, he finally settled on, and the future parents smiled at him. Sal was quite sure that he would get to know them quite well in the end. He had always been a responsible father and godfather, meaning that he would make sure that his children and godchildren wouldn't have to grow up without him. Then let's do this, he finally said. You know what you have to say? The couple nodded, and Sal stepped closer and then slit first the vampire woman's, then the elder dragon's wrist. Then he took their blood to draw the runes on the confused-looking baby boy. He stepped back and out of the circle. For a moment he closed his eyes, then he took a deep breath and activated the circle. White light filled the woods around them. Then Seraphina took the head of her child into her hands, kissing his forehead. "You are my son," she intoned, and the ritual started. The stone circle lit in a blue light, blue flames dancing in the night sky. "You are my flesh." The runes Saul had written with Seraphina's blood on the boy lit up in blue fire before spreading beneath the child's skin. Saul was quite happy that there hadn't been a Horcrux involved this time around. He wouldn't have fancied the idea of carving runes into the skin of a little child. He even shuddered just at that thought. "You are my son," Seraphina continued. The fire enveloped the little boy but clearly didn't seem to hurt him in any way or form. "You are my soul." This time the boy whined, clearly a little uncomfortable, but not truly hurting at the same time. Seraphina swayed for a moment before she continued. "You are my son," she said, her grip tightening. "I give birth to you today." This time the boy started to cry when the changes in his heritage started to affect his body. "I name you today. You are my son. Your name is Philippus." This time Wilhelm joined in. He kissed the feet of his son. "You are my son," he intoned. "You are my flesh." The light surrounding the boy changed, and he wiggled a little bit more, still crying softly. It was clear that the parents wished nothing but to soothe the boy, but as long as the ritual was in place, they couldn't do anything. The ritual would have to finish first, or it would kill the child. "You are my son," Wilhelm continued. "You are my soul." The little boy's crying turned into sobbing. "You are my son," Wilhelm said. "I give birth to you today." Again, the changes in the boy's heritage made the little boy cry louder. "I name you today. Your name is Theophrastus," he said. Sal stepped up next to the father. One of his hands got hold of the little boy's right shoulder. "I name you my godson," he intoned, like his own godfather Ollivander had spoken so long ago. "Your name is Aureolus." Sal actually didn't know where he had gotten that name from, but it had been the first one he had thought of, and it somehow seemed fitting for the little boy, so he gave it. "So be Bombastus," Seraphina finished, "because I named you my son. Be von Hohenheim, because your father Wilhelm named you his son. Be Malfoy, because Salvatio Malfoy named you his godson." Sal winced a little at the last bit, but full names didn't matter in this ritual. As long as the parents' first names were right and the magic could find a way to connect to the people the little boy should be connected to, the names in this ritual were not that important, with the exception of the name of the child itself. Since Sal was Salvatio Malfoy and had been named it by his parents, it wasn't a lie, and therefore legal for the ritual. There were other rituals where names mattered a lot more, but normally, as long as you considered the name you were using yours, it didn't matter in the adoption ceremony if you weren't the child. In that moment a dazzling bright light erupted from the little boy's body, and then the light stopped. The darkness of the early night returned. The ritual was done. Immediately Seraphina scooped up her child and soothed it. Wilhelm, on the other hand, turned and hugged Sal. "Thank you," he said while swaying on his feet. "Thank you, thank you, thank you, Meister Herr." Sal, a little bit uncomfortable, patted the other man's shoulder. "You're welcome," he said. "You're very welcome indeed." With that he helped the new little family home before returning to his granddaughter's house. The moment he opened the door, Andromeda already accosted him. "You're just in time," she told him. "Emilia has gone into labor." Sal groaned. It seemed that this would be a long day, today, and even longer than he had anticipated. But in the end, Sal didn't mind it at all. He smiled when he helped to give birth to his first great-grandson. "His name is Maximilius," his granddaughter said, smiling. Sal smiled tiredly at the little boy. "Welcome to the world, little Maximilius," he said, smiling. "Welcome to the world." Year 1505. When Andromeda died, it happened without any warning. One day she had been pottering around like always. The next, she simply never woke up. It was a heartbreaking experience for Sal. "I'm sorry, son," his uncle Nick told him when they buried her. "I'm sorry." Sal just smiled at his uncle, who had started to work at Hogwarts about 10 years ago. "It's all right," he said before taking a deep breath. "It's all right. I knew she was old. I'm not that surprised that she died." His uncle just patted his back. "If you need some, we're here," he told Sal, and Sal nodded. For the next months he buried himself in work. He worked as a healer in Hogwarts and took over his wife's position as a potions master until someone else could be found. His wife had loved to work as a potions mistress and therefore held the position in Hogwarts until her death. Anastasius had left Hogwarts and was currently somewhere on the country. Sal had no idea where, and Sal's grandparents also weren't at Hogwarts, but somewhere else in the world. Sal guessed the Sahara. Sal didn't mind too much that the rest of his family wasn't there, even if he had a hard time to console his daughter and granddaughter at the same time. And maybe Sal would have stayed at Hogwarts for a little bit longer if the rumors hadn't started to spread again. Then rumors about unnatural coldness, ice and bad memories. Perdita, Sal said finally to his daughter, who had started to help him in the hospital wing for quite some time. Would you mind taking care of the hospital wing alone? His daughter looked at him warily. You don't plan on dying, do you, father? She asked, fear in her eyes. Sal just smiled and shook his head. I don't, he said, but I want to go wandering. I can't continue to stay here. I need to get out and wander. I promise I will return, but I don't want to stay. His daughter looked at him confused. Father, she said hesitatingly, you're 2 years older than Mother. Do you really think that you should go wandering at your age? Sal smiled and shrugged. Why not? He asked lightly. Except of his uncle and aunt, nobody knew that he would not die for a long, long time. His wife had known that he would live a lot longer than she, but even she hadn't known the full extent and the reason why he was different. In his children's eyes, he looked as old as he should look if he had aged somewhat naturally. Sal didn't plan to tell them anything different than they knew. It was better if not too many people knew of his continued existence, especially considering that some people might come after him just because of it. So when his daughter just gawked at him, he smiled at her, touched her cheek and caressed it. I will be fine, he said. Don't worry about me. I will write you ever so often. Perdita blinked, then she sighed. If that's what you wish, father, she said, then I wish you well. I will return, Sal said earnestly. I promise. With that he left the castle to hunt down the newest rumors about the Dementors. Not even 2 days later, Sal had reached the sea. Over the last few months he had gotten more and more reports of people being found in a coma, of icy lands and fog. It had taken him a while to remember why he found those findings suspicious, and the moment he did remember, he knew he had to go there and stop them. Unsurprisingly, when he found them, they weren't alone. Oh, look who goes there, the man in their mid giggled. Sal had never met that man before, but he remembered the boy from all those years ago, and considering that he was wearing human skulls as jewelry, Sal didn't think that he was that eager to make the man's acquaintance. Oh, how beautiful. Seems like someone came here to meet the old Ecrisdis after all. How lovely to make your acquaintance. Looks like my babies will be well fed tonight. Sal let his gaze roam over the Dementors surrounding the man, Ecrisdis. If the man was to believe, it also didn't look like the man remembered Sal. But then Sal looked now a lot younger than he had at their first encounter. I don't think that they are your babies in any way or form, he commented. The man just snickered. They listen to me, child, he said with the logic of either the evil of the insane. Sal wasn't yet sure which actually applied to the man. That means they are mine. I doubt that they will listen to you anymore when your entertainment factor has vanished, Sal replied dryly. The other man just giggled. If that's what you think, child, he said. Then he gestured at Sal. Feed from him now. I'm tired of his babbling. The Dementors immediately eagerly came at Sal, at least until the first actually touched him. Sal could only look at the Dementor in surprise when it suddenly screeched in fear and then continued to burst into flames. Over the flames, the soft thrills of a phoenix could be heard. The other Dementors at that floated backwards. The man in their midst frowned. That hasn't happened before, he said, sounding a little confused. He's a child of our blood, one of the Dementors rattled. Unnatural. Half-breed, soul-destroyer. Sal looked at the Dementors in interest at that. He had only once seen a Dementor dying, but the combusting had been a lot different than the death of the current Dementor. Yet the moment one of them had tried to touch him, they had burst into flames. This hadn't happened when he was still in the future. I guess something definitely changed since the future. And now, he thought surprised, and that something had not only made his patronus, but also himself basically toxic for Dementors. Wonder how that happened. Before he could muse about it further, Ecrisdis, half Dementor, half human, spoke up. Unnatural? The human asked, confused. Why, he's just the same as all the others. Phoenix breed, the Dementor hissed. Phoenix breed with our blood, deadly, bastard, unnatural. Sal looked surprised at his hands at that. It had been his adoption by his Astarat that changed his danger status towards the Dementors. Kill it, destroy it, can't let it live, the Dementor rattled. Danger, deadly, unnatural. And with that, the other Dementors glided forward towards Sal. Sal frowned at them. He had originally come to just see what was happening, but now he was actually facing those creatures alone. Ironic, he thought bitterly, that it has to happen here again. The last time I was forced to stop the Vikings in this very place, and now I'm here again to stop another threat. Why by wind and fire am I always alone when I have to confront a new might-be conqueror of Britain in this part of the country? Sadly, nobody dared to answer that question. Sal sighed, then he closed his eyes and concentrated on the fire within himself. He wouldn't be able to do a lot, but maybe he would be able to do enough. With that thought, he ducked out of the way of the advancing Dementors before pulling out his wand. Expecto Patronum, he whispered. Instead of a stag, an already known phoenix burst from the tip of his wand. The phoenix was alight with golden fire, and it dove into the Dementors as if they were candy. All around Sal, the Dementors caught fire. Some of them tried to kill Sal's phoenix with their fog, but the fury Sal felt drove this construct of fire and positive emotions further. Those creatures had attacked Sal's people again and again. Those creatures had dared to invade the kingdom of Sal's father, no matter how often Sal had driven them off. Those creatures had threatened and attacked Sal's loved ones and Sal himself in the past or future without mercy. Sal had enough. They would pay for it. When his phoenix started to flicker, Sal knelt down onto the earth and pressed his hands into it. Like Peverell had done it once, all those years ago, Sal concentrated and then fed his flames and his fury into the earth itself, willing it to burst out of the earth all around him to encircle his opponents. For a moment he could feel the drain that not only the spell but also the fire circle had onto his magic. Then the circle burst into the open and took 2 more Dementors down before encircling the rest. I am Salvazahar Pendragon, Sal said icily, and this is my country to police, to protect and to rule. You, who have trespassed on these lands, have no right to be here. Be gone. The Dementors screeched again, this time their fear nearly visible. Please, Pendragon, one of them whispered, and Sal was surprised that the Dementor even knew that word. We will leave this land, just don't kill us. Sal thought about it. He hadn't actually planned to kill them all. They, like any other Fairbeard, had a place in the world. They just didn't have a place in Sal's country. Still, Sal definitely wouldn't tell them that he had never planned to kill them all. He was a healer first, after all. He killed to protect the innocent from their clutches. He killed when they attacked him, but he definitely wouldn't murder them in cold blood. Also, there were too many to kill and too many to control with just his own magic. No, he had to do it differently if he wanted to win in the end. Right now, he had the upper hand. He had to use this chance. Who knew if he got another one like that after all? A contract, he finally said. Between you and me, no Dementor will ever cast an Anther shadow on this country, and I will let you be. The Dementors didn't actually speak with each other, but a few minutes later, one of them spoke up for all of them anyway. We agree, the Dementor said. Sal just shot another look at the wizard in their midst. And you will take your pet with you? He added. He didn't need another evil wizard on the Isles, especially if said wizard might actually be evil and insane. Agreed, the Dementor said again. The moment one of your own enters these lands, I have the right to kill them, Sal added. Again, there was a short bout of silence. Then the Dementor spoke again. Agreed. And with that started the contract that would govern the interactions between Sal and the Dementors until way in the future. Wilhelm, Sal greeted the man when the door was opened. The elder dragon smiled at him the moment he recognized him. Salvatio, he said, You look a little bit younger than I remember you. Sal just answered with a smile of his own. Magic, he said, not interested in explaining if he meant his older form or the currently younger form with that reply. Sal again looked like 20-something, his preferred age, mostly. He had come to the future Germany to meet Wilhelm and his family, after the elder dragon had asked him to. Philippus wants to learn to be a healer, Wilhelm told Sal when he opened the door further. I hope that you would be willing to take over his training. Sal just inclined his head. If that's what he wishes to do, then I'm quite willing to help, he replied unconcerned. But if I take over his training, he will have to leave and wander with me. I currently feel a little bit restless. I fear that I can't imagine myself to stay in one place for quite some time for now. The elder dragon just nodded. That's fine, he said. You're his godfather, and it's not as if my wife and I won't ever see Philippus again. We will visit every so often, Sal promised. Then they stepped into the living room where a young boy and Wilhelm's wife Serafina were seated. The boy saw Sal and jumped to his feet. Givata, he greeted his godfather enthusiastically. How good to see you again. Sal had been visiting the child regularly, sometimes even with Andromeda when she had been still alive. Philippus, he greeted the child, I heard you want to be a healer? I do, Givata, I do, the boy said enthusiastically. Are you here to teach me? If that's what you want, then I am quite willing to do so, Philippus, Sal replied, amused. Many years later, the name Philippus Theophrastus Aureolus Bombastus von Hohenheim would be nearly unknown to most mundanes and magicals. Paracelsus, on the other hand, would never be forgotten. Not a lot of people would ever know that those two names were the name of one and the same person. In the end, Sal would wander with Philippus until the boy finished his training, and way beyond that as well. In 1524, Sal finally left Philippus in Salzburg, where the young boy, by then man, continued on until he would be known to history as Paracelsus. Sal, meanwhile, started to wander alone again. He went to France, where his uncle, aunt, daughter, and granddaughter had started to live, and stayed with them for a while. When his daughter died, he moved on. All in all, he wandered alone for about 10 years, and then he returned to future Scotland, never knowing that he would be dragged into a new kind of terror the moment he reached the borders between the magical and the mundane world of Scotland. The one thing that led him there was a simple letter. My dearest opponent, it said, I came by some information that I thought you should know. Don't worry, I kept our treaty. Neither I nor my companions set a foot on the Isles at all. We stumbled over this particular information near Rouen. I am also quite aware that you have no reason to trust me, but then I have no reason to write you as well. It doesn't actually concern me after all. Yet, there is one thing I truly abhor. I don't mind killing people, I actually enjoy it if you remember, but I abhor the mistreatment of children. There's something grave going on in that magical academy on the Isles. My informant spoke of the head doing things and using children for things that should never be done, let alone to children. I wouldn't have bothered if it had been an adult against another, but even I draw the line with children. I urge you to take a look. I'm even willing to help you, just this once, monster child. Sincerely, Ecrisdis of Azkaban. And as much as Sal would have wished to see the letter as a trap, he couldn't ignore it, so he headed towards Hogwarts. It was autumn in 1534, when Sal would reach the outer skirts of Hogwarts' surrounding grounds. It would be there that he would be forced to do something he had never done before. A healer on warpath, Sal thought amused. That's not what you'll see every day. And yet, here he was, ready for battle. He bared his teeth in a semblance of a smile. But then, he thought, sometimes it needs to be a healer who goes to war. Sometimes only a healer will be the one to do the right thing, not the easy. And today was a day like that. Sal squared his shoulders. Ready? The man next to him asked. Sal took a deep breath. Ready, he affirmed. His hands touched the black iron of the gates of Hogwarts. Hello, Atri, he greeted Hogwarts. I've come to take your master down. And the old black iron gates slowly opened.